Okay, so in the last couple of days, I've been really enjoying playing the Snake Eye Fiendsmith Azamina deck. I think it's really good. It's really fun to play, and I think it's really strong competitively as well. A lot of other people agree with me. It's a really popular deck. It's looking like it's going to be one of the best decks for the upcoming format, alongside maybe some other Fiendsmith variants like Rescue Ace and maybe Tia, and also Tenpai as well. So yeah, it's looking like it's a really good deck, and I thought I'd go ahead and make a little guide on exactly how to play it. So for a while, since we've had the announcement, I've been working on this deck. I've been theory crafting with a lot of other good players who've been playing the same deck and trying to figure that out as well. I've been building a couple of spreadsheets, which I've posted on my Discord and on my Twitter, and we're going to go over them later in this video. So yeah, I just wanted to make a little guide explaining how this deck works. The basic plan of the deck, it's basically a Snake Eye deck, just like Fire King, just like the pure Snake Eye in the past. It's a one-card combo deck, you're trying to draw a one-card starter, and then as much of your deck is supposed to be hand traps as possible, so that you can play with like a Snake Eye Ash and then draw as many hand traps as possible to back it up. Your win condition going first is to resolve a one-card combo, which probably wins the game. The end boards are really strong. We tend to have Omni Negates with the new Azamina cards, Desiree is an Omni Negate, Caesar is a couple of really strong disruptions. We tend to end on Flamberge plus IP in the back row. We have Appaloosa, we have Princess in the graveyard in every line, so there's a lot of disruptions. The end boards are good enough to win the game, and they tend to come from one-card combos as well. So yeah, just like every other Snake Eye deck, it's a one-card combo deck. Your win condition going second is to just draw multiple hand traps and stop your opponent from playing. That's the basic game plan of the deck. All of the new cards, the Fiendsmith Engraver and the 3 new Deception Sinful Spoils, are all one-card starters. They all work. This is full combo by itself. This is full combo by itself. And of course the original Snake Eye cards, Ash, Bonfire, 1-for-1, Diabellstar, they're all one card full combo as well. So yeah, that's basically the game plan of the deck. I'm going to go through each card one by one just to explain what they do. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the old cards, like the Snake Eye cards, but especially the new ones, I will just go over quickly how their effects work and what their role is. So yeah, I'm just going to jump over to EDO Pro so that I can talk about them in a more sensible order. Okay, so starting off, I have the deck here in a more sensible order. I've also got some cards down here at the bottom, which are cards that I'm not playing, but you could reasonably consider playing these cards, so I'm going to quickly explain my thoughts on these. So yeah, starting with the Snake Eye cards, these are the ones that don't require much explanation. Snake Eye Ash is obviously your main starter. You're trying to normal summon this or special summon it. You can search it with Bonfire, you search it with OSS, or summon it from the deck with OSS. It's the main target for 1-for-1. This is obviously what makes the deck work. You search for Poplar, and then you go full combo from there. You have to play Oak. Oak is not one of those cuttable cards. I know sometimes Snake Eye decks talk about cutting Oak, but I don't think this deck is one of those. You definitely play Oak. And of course you play Flamberge. This is part of your win condition. You obviously want to float 2 material as part of your combo so that you can have enough bodies to make things like Appaloosa and yeah, mainly just Appaloosa. That's what you're link climbing into. But it's also mandatory for part of your end board where you use the effect on the field to summon IP from your back row, and that's how you then go into SP and disrupt your opponent that way. It's usually the fire monster that you end on as well for Princess to target, right? You have to target a fire for Princess, and this is usually the only fire monster that you have left on the end board because all of the other new pieces for the end board are not fire. Appaloosa is a wind, of course. The Azamina cards are not fire. The Fiendsmith boss monsters are not fire, neither is Caesar, so it is Flamberge that you're trying to end on to make Princess live. So yeah, this is obviously super important to the deck. Temple, this is the main search target for Poplar in this build. The idea is that you're going to not search OSS, but just search for Temple, and then Temple's going to place Snake Eye's Diabellstar. So the way these two cards work basically is that it's a convoluted way of saying special summon an extra body, right? Temple places Diabellstar into the back row from the deck, and then Diabellstar has the effect to special summon itself to the field if you have another fire in the graveyard. So you basically swap it out, put something from your graveyard in the back row, and then this special summons itself to the field. So it's extra steps, but basically Temple says special summon Diabellstar from your deck. Snake Eyes Diabellstar specifically. That's basically what this card says. And that's how most of the lines work. When we look at the spreadsheet, you'll see that most of the time Temple is placing Diabellstar, and we're also always getting Temple with Poplar as well in most lines. It's better than OSS, which means that if we're going for Temple in most of our core combos, it means that the OSS is available for something else. So if you want to start your combo with any of your Sinful Spoils cards, Deception, Diabellstar, and Wanted obviously get to OSS, then you could use this, or if you hard draw it as well and you normal summon something and then use it from the field, it's the same line, right? Because you get to Snake Eye Ash into Poplar, and then you're not hindered from your main combo line because Poplar wasn't trying to search OSS anyway, it was just trying to go Temple. So it's exactly the same line to start with OSS, which is why OSS is actually a better draw now than it was in the Fire King decks or any other previous builds of Snake Eye. Yeah, so you'll see when we get to the lines that very often we go through OSS early and then do a full one-card combo with Ash. Bonfire, of course, just 2 extra copies of Ash. You can also search for Poplar with Bonfire and then special summon it. The reason why you might do that is to preserve your normal summon so that you can play better into an Imperm. If you just get Snake Eye Ash and then normal summon Snake Eye Ash, and you get Impermed, you have nothing else. But if you got Poplar, and then special summon the Poplar, if you get Impermed there, you can actually still normal summon. So you can normal summon something like a Fuwalos or an Ash, Vela, Maxi, and the reason that is significant is because you can turn any 2 monsters now into Moon of the Closed Heaven, which is full Fiendsmith combo. Basically this card is completely generic, it's just going to let you summon Engraver from the deck. This card turns into Requiem. The only catch right now is that since we don't have Lacrima, that line actually doesn't go anywhere yet. It's still better than ending on nothing, but it doesn't go anywhere. So it's probably still better to just make SP in a situation like that, where you have 2 random bodies, rather than going for Moon of the Closed Heaven, at least right now. But once we get Lacrima, we didn't receive this in the latest pack, but once we do get this card, then any 2 monsters is going to be full Fiendsmith combo, so going Poplar with Bonfire, just so that you can play better into Imperm and Vela, is actually a real thing once we get Lacrima. But for now, it's mainly just going to search Snake Eye Ash. And then 1 for 1 is just extra consistency. You do have to send a card from your hand to the graveyard for this, which is more of a cost than it sounds. You might look at the deck and see a lot of extra hand traps, especially Fuwalos. Seems very easy to discard a Fuwalos, or a Nibiru, or a Bestial. You know, our full combo wins the game, we don't need our hand traps. However, the problem is that everyone's playing hand traps in the current format, so if you discard a hand trap, and then you get ashed or impermed, or like stopped somehow on your 1-card combo, then you're gonna really wish you had that hand trap, right? You don't want to go -1. It is also very conflicting with the other cards that also go -1, like Diabellstar. This card, obviously, to start your combo, has to discard a card. And the new Deception, this card also requires you to tribute a monster from your hand or field. So this card is also a -1. So if you get ashed on this, or impermed on Diabellstar, ashed on 1 for 1, that's a lot of cards that are going -1. And if you have too many of them in your opening hand, it's kind of the same problem that Branded has sometimes going second. If you have too many of them, then you're not going to be able to use them all, because you're going to run out of cards too quickly. And it's too risky to discard every single hand trap in your hand just to resolve your combos, because if you get stopped, you have nothing to defend yourself. So that is one downside to 1 for 1. And I've actually seen a lot of lists not play it. And I agree with them. I agree that this card kind of is suspicious. But for me, it's about consistency. I don't think this deck quite has enough starters otherwise, if you don't play this card. The only consideration that I would play instead of this is a second OSS. Like I said before, OSS is a better draw in this build because you don't have to search for this with Poplar. Poplar wants to search Temple anyway, and OSS is a slightly better draw than 1-for-1 because 1-for-1 you have to send the monster from the hand, whereas OSS can send any card and it can be on your field as well. It doesn't have to be a monster, doesn't have to be in your hand, which means you probably have a higher chance of having something random to send away, right? Maybe you have a Temple on the field, a Snake Eyes Diabellstar in the back row, a Deception that's been ashed, just sitting on your field. You know, any random monster that's been impermed, you can send it away for OSS. So I think this might be a better draw than 1-for-1. But for now, I'm just playing one of both because I'm not really sure which one I prefer yet. And then OSS itself, obviously you have to play at least one because it's part of your engine. So yeah, that's the Snake Eye cards. Now moving on to the more interesting cards. This is the new stuff. This is Sinful Spoils Deception. So Sinful Spoils Deception, this card is a continuous spell. It's a Sinful Spoils, which means it's settable with Diabellstar. So you can access this with Diabellstar and Wanted. You can also recycle it from the graveyard or use Wanted, right, to recycle this, put it back into the deck from the graveyard to draw a card. And what it does is it contribute a monster from your hand or field to add an Azamina card from your deck to your hand. The only target that we're playing for this, the only Azamina card in our deck, is Sacred Azamina, or the Hallowed Azamina. This is the brick for Azamina. It's not a great draw because it doesn't do anything by itself, but what you're trying to do is search for it with Deception. This card allows you to access your Azamina extra deck, so that's why we're playing this engine. And then Deception also has a couple of other effects which are not really that relevant. There is a second effect here that says if a monster is sent to your opponent's graveyard and you control an Azamina monster, you can do this little drain thing where you gain 1500 and your opponent loses 1500. This really never comes up. You might think that this is a cheeky way of just like winning in time in a tournament or a way of gaining incremental free value, but it actually doesn't come up at all. Just because of the way the Hallowed Azamina works, the way the lines work is that you send away the Deception very, very quickly once you activate it. If you resolve the combo, you're going to very quickly send it away for the Hallowed Azamina. So your opponent is not going to have send anything to the graveyard to trigger this because you're not going to have an Azamina monster on the board by the time that you get rid of Deception, right? So you're never going to have both on the board at the same time, is what I'm getting at. And then there's also this last effect, which is during the end phase, if it's in the graveyard, because it was sent there this turn. Sounds like a branded card, right? You can reset it to your field, which is nice. It's cute. It helps in random hand trap grind games where you're just hand trapping each other and nobody's resolving any combos. But on its own, it doesn't do anything. If you full combo, you don't need this to reset. It's honestly just blocking your zones. A lot of the time, if you draw like a lot of imperms and cold buys and you want to set them, you're not going to have room to even reset this. So like it's really, really irrelevant if you combo. It's only going to come up if you have like a really weird grind game where you do actually appreciate this card coming back. So yeah, the main effect is just to tribute a card from your hand or field to add the Hallowed Azamina to your hand. And then the way this card works is that it synergizes very nicely with this card. You send away any number of Sinful Spoils from your hand or field to the graveyard to then special summon your Azamina fusions from the extra deck. The way this is worded is a little more complicated than it actually is, or it sounds more complicated than it actually is. For every 4 levels that the fusion monster has, you send 1 Sinful Spoils. And you round down. So basically, these level 6 fusion monsters, you only have to send 1. So basically what you do is you send Deception, you can also send OSS, you can also send Wanted, and that just summons either one of these from your extra deck. The plan here is that you're going to use Deception, search for Azamina, or search for the Hallowed Azamina, use the Hallowed Azamina to send away the Deception right away as the material to summon one of your fusions. And the the two fusions, basically what they do is this one, Ilia Sylvia. This is an Omni Negate, so this is part of your end board if you're going for it. But yeah, this one, if you're going for it, it's really hard to hover over these cards. Oh my god. This one is an Omni Negate. This is protection from hand traps, and it also helps your end board be stronger. And then this one searches for a Sinful Spoils on summon. So this is how you get to OSS. Usually, you'll see the exact lines when we get to the spreadsheet section, but generally the idea is that you go for both, because the Hallowed Azamina actually is not once per turn. You're going to use its second effect in the graveyard to add itself back to hand, and then go for the other fusion. So pretty much you go for Arcielago, search for OSS, which is full combo by itself, and then you add the Azamina back, go for Ilia Sylvia, which is your end board Omni Negate and hand trap protection, and then you go for your OSS line where you full combo with Snake Eye. That's basically how these cards work. It's basically full combo plus a free Omni Negate, which is obviously stronger in terms of sealing, but it is a little more risky to hand traps because Deception has to tribute a card, right? It has to tribute a monster as cost, so you do have to go -1. Then we have Diabellstar. Diabellstar is the same card that it's always been, same for Wanted. It's just an extra way to get to OSS, which can be full Snake Eye combo. However, now what you can also do, and this is what you're going to do most of the time, is to actually set Deception, because, well, it's just better, right? Why would you set OSS and then go for full Snake Eye combo when you can set Deception, use Deception to go for your Azamina line, where you search for OSS anyway with Arcielago, and then also get a free Omni Negate before using the OSS. So it's basically just better going for Deception instead of OSS, because you get to do the same line, but you get to summon an Omni Negate first. So you can protect yourself from hand traps, and you can also have a stronger end board if you don't end up using it to negate a hand trap. That's how Diabellstar works. Wanted is obviously the same. Something that you can do, a little trick that you can do with Azamina, or the Hallowed Azamina and Wanted, is to activate the Hallowed Azamina as Chainlink 1, and then use Wanted as Chainlink 2, and then you get to summon with Azamina by sending away the Wanted from the field mid-chain, basically. So this resolves searching for Diabellstar, and then this sends it away in response, right? Like you go Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2, this resolves, and then you send it from the field to summon one of your fusion monsters. It's just a nice little way of getting an extra search, right? Instead of having to send this from the field to the grave, or from your hand to the graveyard, you can actually resolve the search as well. So it's a nice way of going +1 when you draw this combo. Something else that comes up about Wanted is that it's not just a card that you have to hard draw now. You actually search for this quite a lot. If you start with Deception, then you can search for the Hallowed Azamina and then go for Arcielago. There's no reason, a lot of the time, well, there's sometimes a good reason for it, but a lot of the time there's no reason to search for OSS if you haven't been through Diabellstar yet. Because you can also search for Wanted, which searches for Diabellstar, which then gets you to OSS anyway. And you also get a free draw 1 in the process. So this is a card that comes up a lot more often now, because you can search for it. You don't have to hard draw this card. But yeah, other than that, Diabellstar, obviously it's really, really good. You're going to max out on this. You're only playing 1 Wanted because it's limited. You would play more if you could. This can be full combo as a starter, but it can also be an extender. And in terms of Fiendsmith combo, this is really helpful too, because it's a special summon. So paired with any normal summon, you can go into Moon and start your Fiendsmith lines as well. Next, moving on to Engraver. This is the Fiendsmith engine now. The Fiendsmith engine is really, really good, and the best draw is obviously Engraver. The way that this little 4-card engine works is that these are good draws. This is a mediocre draw, but it's kind of okay, and then this is a pretty bad draw. Until we get Lacrima, Tract and Luri are not full combo, so it's only Engraver that is a good draw. Whereas these two are pretty subpar draws. Tract can be okay in practice, this will be fine in most hands, but Luri is generally quite bad, and Engraver is always good. The reason Engraver is better than these cards is because it gets an extra name into the graveyard. The way the line works, and you'll see this in the spreadsheet, is that you go into Requiem and then special summon a second Engraver from your deck using the Requiem effect. And that gets you 2 Engravers into rotation. Whereas if you start with the Tract or the Lurry, you don't have that second Engraver name, and that's really important because you need this graveyard effect of Engraver where you can special summon it back from the graveyard. This is how you do a lot of the lines. You don't always use this graveyard effect, but when you do, it's very, very important, and it is very, very important for the Engraver 1-card combo. You have to be able to use this graveyard effect, and you can't do that if you don't have the second name. So Engraver is a good draw, and Tract is a pretty bad draw, and Lurry is a very bad draw. Basically, that's how this engine works. The extra deck is mainly for the Fiendsmith package. You can see that there's so many cards here that are all for the Fiendsmith engine, so it's very intensive on the extra deck. And this card here, the Moon of the Close Heaven, like I've mentioned, is what allows you to get to Fiendsmith without having to draw Engraver, so any 2 bodies can get to it. It's pretty good. Yeah, so Engraver is a great draw. There is also this other effect, this second effect on Engraver, where you can send an equip card you control and target a monster on the field and destroy it, right? Or send it to the graveyard even, it doesn't destroy. So it's actually removal going second. This actually comes up because very often what happens in this deck when you're going second is that you have a free effect of Requiem. This card can equip itself from the graveyard to an Engraver, and that's just for free. You basically don't need to use this effect in any other specific way going second. You can use this for like getting fodder for Snake Eye cards to send away and for OSS, but there is no mandatory way that you use this in your combo, so at least not going second. And going first, there is some lines that need this, but going second, which is where this removal effect is going to matter, you don't have to use this very often, so you can do this for free. Just equip to Engraver and then target a monster. It's a great way that Engraver can force an interaction from your opponent by itself without having to commit any of your other starters, right? So if you have a Bonfire or a Snake Eye Ash, you can just hold this in the hand, go for an Engraver line, get to the point where you equip Requiem, and then force an interaction. That way you can, you know, force some bait things before you go for your main line. So yeah, it's a very, very good card. Engraver is insane. It's absolutely insane. And then you have to, unfortunately, play 2 bad draws in the deck, which is whatever. It's not that bad, but it's also pretty bad, right? Like, it's bricks. You have to play them because the deck is better with the Fiendsmith engine, but when you draw these cards, it definitely feels bad. The way Tract works is that Tract adds a Light Fiend and then discards a card, and that's how you're going to make use of Lurry. You're going to add Lurry to your hand, and then discard it. This is the simplest card in the deck. If it's discarded, then you special summon it. And that's a mandatory effect as well. And it's a Light Fiend, so it's obviously going to be able to be linked into Requiem. An Engraver just discards itself to add the Tract, then Tract activates to discard Lurry. It's basically extra steps, but both of these cards, Tract and Engraver, just say special summon Lurry from the deck. They basically just say special summon Lurry from the deck. Especially Tract. Engraver has those bonuses, which is why it's good. It has the graveyard effect. But for the most part, the way that this combo starts is by special summoning Lurry from the deck, essentially, and then linking it into Requiem. There is also this graveyard effect on Tract, which is really good. It can fusion summon using monsters you control. You do have Fiendsmith fusion monsters. You have Lacrima and Desiree. Desiree says that it's basically an Omni-negate. You can negate effects of face-up cards. You can't negate cards in the hand or in the graveyard, but it does negate anything on the board, and it doesn't destroy, but it does negate. So like it's basically an Omni-negate. It's very close. And you have Lacrima, which helps you extend as well. This card can add an Engraver back from the graveyard or from banished, and it can also special summon it to the field, and that's how you're going to make rank 6s. You're going to go into Caesar if you want Nibiru protection or end board strength, and you can go Beatrice if you want to access your Snake Eye cards, if you haven't got to them yet. So yeah, it's very, very good. Tract allows you to get a second fusion. You usually primarily fuse with Sequence, and then Tract sometimes in some lines will allow you to make both fusions. Generally you're choosing just one of them to make, but Tract can sometimes allow you to make both of them in the same combo. Yeah, so that's the Fiendsmith engine, and that's all for the engine cards. The rest of the deck is non-engine. The reason why I'm playing this non-engine specifically, obviously this is subject to change as the meta changes, and as the format changes, it's obviously going to be subject to change, but the way I understand the format to be right now is that the only good cards in like Fiendsmith mirror matches going second are the Maxis and the Fuwalasses. Every other hand trap, like Ash and Imperm and Vela, Bestials, Nibiru, every other hand trap on its own can be very easily played through. So if you want to have an impact with an Ash or an Imperm, you basically have to draw it alongside another hand trap, right? So an Ash plus an Imperm, or an Ash, a Vela, and a Bestial, right? Nibiru is never going to do anything on its own. Ash, Imperm, Vela, way too easy to play through. Way too easy to play through. Right, the Snake Eye deck was already good at playing through hand traps because you have Diabellstar, which is a special summon, Bonfire, which is an extender, 1/1 OSS, they're all extenders, but now you have Engraver, which is an extender or a starter, Tract, which is an extender, Deception is a starter or an extender. If you start with Azamina, you get to set up an Omni Negate before committing your other plays. So the deck is just so good at playing through low impact hand traps that you generally just don't expect to ever stop the deck with just one. So if you want to play, if you want to start them with Ash and Imperm, you have to draw two, basically, is what I'm getting at. And same for Nibiru and Bestials, which is why the Maxi and the Fuwalas are the best ones, because if your opponent doesn't have an out to the Maxi minigame, then these cards actually are different. These actually will carry you by themselves. Doesn't matter how good the deck is at extending, that's not how these cards work, right? So you're going to resolve these, and they're going to win you the game. So that's the plan. You want to max out on Fuwalas, even though it's not great going first. You're obviously picking first with this deck. So you kind of don't like Fuwalas, but going first, you do have a few ways to get rid of it, and it's mainly here for going second, right? It's just because you want as much of a chance going second as possible. What you can do with this card, if you draw it going first, is discard it for Diabellstar, tribute it for Deception. You can even normal summon it, and it contributes to Moon, right? Because any two monsters can get you to Fiendsmith, so it could be a normal summon as well. Yeah, you mainly play it for going second. 2 Maxi, obviously, it's semi-limited now. Ash is here not because it's an amazing hand trap, but because it contributes to the mini game, right? To negate Maxi and Fuwalas. That's the main reason to play this card. And it does also double as a hand trap, so it does help you achieve that win condition going second sometimes. That win condition of drawing multiple hand traps alongside each other so that you can actually stop them from starting and extending. Yeah, so it does do that as well. You can Ash like an OSS, you can then Imperm a Sequence or something to just combine multiple low impact hand traps together to try and win the game. That's the same logic as why we're playing 3 Imperm and why we're playing 3 Vela, just trying to pad out that count. Imperm and Vela are kind of mandatory cards as well, just because Tempai is still in the format. This is the same for Ash as well. Most hand traps are really bad against Tempai. The deck is so good at playing through them because they just ignore them. It's not like this deck, which is actually weak to them technically, but then usually draws a way to play through them. Tempai actually just is not weak to them at all. It's only Ash and Vela which have like consistently good value against Tempai. They're going to OTK you through Maxi, Bestials do nothing, Nibiru does nothing, and Imperm too often gets swept away by a Lightning Storm or a Heavy Storm, right? Or a Harpy's Feather Duster. So it's really only Ash to negate Kaiman, and Vela, which you can keep in your hand, which do anything against those decks. So I do feel like there's a really good reason to still max out on these in the format, because Tempai is still very good. Bestials are good because what a bestial does is stop the Azamina starter, right? So if you start Deception or Diabellstar or Wanted and you go for a standard line, bestial is going to stop the Hallowed Azamina from being able to add itself back to the hand. So that basically means you don't get a second fusion. A lot of the lines, as you'll see in the spreadsheet section, they're going to go for Arcielago, then they're going to try to add back the Hallowed Azamina to summon the Omni Negate. You're going to use a bestial to prevent this. That's going to mean that they don't have an Omni Negate, which means that the rest of their combo is vulnerable to Ash or Vela, or potentially even Nibiru, depending on how they play it as well. So it is good. The bestials are nice. The idea really is that they trade with every single part of this deck. You can stop the Azamina cards, and usually you will have to, because once they get to the Omni Negate, obviously any hand trap can be negated. So you generally will use a bestial if you have it to stop the Azamina lines, but if they don't start this way, if they start with this Snake Eye or Fiendsmith, bestials can interact with those too. You can stop Fiendsmith cards because they're all lights, so you can stop an Engraver coming from the graveyard. If your opponent activates Lacrima and targets an Engraver, you can banish it with the bestial, right, to prevent a rank 6. You can stop Luri from special summoning itself. Generally the best way to use a bestial is going to be on Engraver against the Fiendsmith engine, but it does depend on your best judgment. Obviously there's a lot of different ways on how to use these. You can even stop Sequence from being equipped to Desiree. This card is a vanilla if it's not equipped with anything, so what you can do is banish Sequence from the graveyard when they try to equip it to Desiree, and that will make their Desiree dead. It's basically a vanilla, and they committed a lot into it, so it can be very worth to use a bestial this way. And then against the Snake Eye engine, you can still get value because, unlike the Fire King build of Snake Eye, what this deck is trying to do every time with its Snake Eye cards is put IP Masquerena in the back row, and then try to special summon it to the field. So a bestial can essentially trade with that as well. If your opponent has no negate, by the time they activate Flamberge, you can banish the Masquerena, and that will be a good use for a bestial. And then there's one Nibiru here. The reason this Nibiru is here is it's a crossout target, and it's also an eventual draw under the Maxis. So let's say our opponent tries to OTK us under Maxi, we can eventually draw into the Nibiru to protect ourselves. I don't consider this card to be good on its own, which is why I definitely don't want to play more than one. You really do need to draw multiple hand traps to have any impact, except for the Maxi and Fulas, which can sometimes... These can be enough by themselves. You can't do anything about this. This is just the minigame. If your opponent has the Cold Buy or the Ash, then they have it. You can't do anything about that. But the other cards, you basically have to build so that you have enough hand traps to always draw 2 of them. And Nibiru doesn't work with itself, right? If you have Nibiru plus Ash, Nibiru plus Impum, Nibiru plus Vela, that's a good combo. But Nibiru plus Nibiru is a bad combo, and you will lose. It's basically not a hand trap at that point, because if Nibiru is your only hand trap, it's not going to work. Your opponent will do a line which beats Nibiru. Even if they don't respect it that much, they probably will still beat one Nibiru. So I just wanted to play one so that I never ever ever have a situation where I'm pairing my one Nibiru with another Nibiru, because I don't have another one. So if I draw this card alongside another hand trap, which is fairly likely, there's about a 50% chance in this build to draw 2 hand traps. If I do pair it with another hand trap, it's going to be a different one. So yeah, that's why I play the one Nibiru. And then the last cards are the Cold Buy and the Crossout. Obviously you play these, you need to max out on the minigame cards, so that's why we're playing these. Okay, so now moving on to the extra deck, starting off with Princess. These are the Snake Eye cards. These ones don't require much explanation. You're a fire deck, so you play Princess. This is just the most custom fire card ever made. We're ending on Appaloosa, so you're going to play Appaloosa. A lot of the time you will have a 2 or 3 material Appaloosa. You don't tend to make 4 material in this deck. This is very hard to do. IP, of course, is for Flamberge to summon, and then the IP is going to summon SP. This is a couple of disruptions by itself, banish, and then like another banish temporarily. so it's 2 disruptions by itself. Appaloosa is like 2 to 3 disruptions. Princess is technically a disruption by itself as well, although it's not an amazing disruption, but it is still a disruption. So between just these 4 cards themselves, which is what your Snake Eye cards set up, you can generally have like 5 or 6 disruptions just ready to go, right? 2 or 3 on Appaloosa, 2 from SP, and then 1 more from Princess. So yeah, these are really, really good. And then we're still playing Heater. Heater was very good in Snake Eye formats anyway, just because it's very easy to make, and if your opponent has anything from the mirror match, any Fire King cards or Snake Eye cards, or even an Ash Blossom, then you can use the Heater, revive a monster, and keep climbing, right? Heater plus anything goes into Princess. It was a very essential part of the Zelantis OTK, right? This Raging Phoenix Zelantis OTK. Heater played a good role there. It was very good in the mirror match in general. And that still exists, technically, that still exists. But the main reason you're actually playing Heater now is just for the turn 1 lines. A lot of the time, you will need something to link off a Princess into, a Fire Monster to link off into, that is, well, a Fire Monster, so that you can then climb into Appaloosa. Sometimes what you can do is use Princess, you can negate Princess, right? So you can revive with it and then negate its effect with Desiree. Desiree can negate any cards on any field during the turn, right? So you can negate Princess and then just turn Princess into Appaloosa because the lock no longer applies. But you're not always going for Desiree. Often you've gone for Beatrice or Caesar, or maybe you're in a situation where you don't have to make a 2-material Appaloosa with a Princess and another monster, and you can still go for a 3-material. In those situations, you want Heater. So you want to be able to link off the Princess into Heater, then you want to be able to make, or then you're able to make non-fire monsters again. So Appaloosa, or maybe IP into Appaloosa, so that you can then place the IP back into the back row. That's what Heater does. It's very, very essential for those combos now. You can't really afford to play one of these down here, the Ambler Whale or the Raging Phoenix. There's a reason these are not in the main extra deck. It's just because there's no room for them anymore. The Fiendsmith cards take up so much room, and the Azamina cards take up a couple of room as well. So yeah, they take up a couple of slots. There's a lot of slots from Fiendsmith. You can't afford to play a Link 4, so you can't link off the Princess into a Link 4. And you also just don't want to, because ending on Raging Phoenix or Ambler Whale, it's way worse than Appaloosa. So a lot of the time you don't miss these cards. Turn 1 at least, you don't miss these cards. You're gonna link off your your Princess into Heater, and then Heater plus any monsters are gonna go into Appaloosa. So that's what these cards do. Then we have the 2 Azamina fusions. I've pretty much covered what these do. Starting with Sylvia, this is an Omni Negate. There's a couple other effects on this card, but they don't matter. Any battle damage your Azamina monster inflicts is doubled. This doesn't matter because it doesn't count itself, so it's not going to be attacking for 3800, unfortunately. And you're never going to have this card and the other fusion on the field at the same time, because you can't do that. That's not really how the Azamina cards work. You have to shuffle one of them back in order to add the Hallowed Azamina back to your hand. So if you're ever going to summon the second one, you have necessarily shuffled the first one back into the extra deck. So this first effect doesn't matter. This third effect doesn't matter when it's destroyed by battle. You get to add a Sinful Spoils Trap. You're not playing a Sinful Spoils Trap. It is only this middle effect that matters. And it's a good effect. It's an Omni Negate, so that's why you're playing this card. Mu Archipelago, this is mainly, again, for the first effect, or the middle effect. The effect that your opponent loses attack does technically matter, and the effect that when this is destroyed, you can add a Sinful Spoils spell. That does technically matter as well. You do have targets like Deception, Wanted, and OSS, but it is mainly this middle effect. On summon, it's going to add an Azamina or a Sinful Spoils card from deck to your hand. You don't play any more Azamina cards, because you've already gone through your Hallowed at this point, but you obviously can search for OSS, Wanted, and those are the targets that you're gonna combo with. Then moving on to the Fiendsmith cards. There's a lot of these cards, pretty much every card left is a Fiendsmith card. We have Requiem. This is the main starter, it's the Link 1. One Light Fiend. So any Light Fiend monster, Engraver, Lurry, or Moon of the Closed Heaven is going to go into Requiem, and then Requiem during the main phase contribute itself to special summon Engraver from your deck. Since we don't have Lacrima yet, the only target is Engraver, but once we do get Lacrima, the main target for Requiem will probably be Lacrima. Lacrima is a free way of basically getting an extra name into rotation, because when this card is summoned it sends Engraver, and then you can summon back the Engraver. So it's an extra name in rotation, which is really important for combos actually. It also allows you to more easily use the effect of Engraver's Graveyard effect, right? The Graveyard effect to special summon itself. Lacrima allows you to do that more easily, but until we get this card, Requiem is just going to be summoning Engraver. And then there's also this second effect in the graveyard to equip it for free onto a non-link Light Fiend. Non-link, so you can't equip it to your sequence, but you can equip it to Engraver or your fusions, Desiree and Lacrima. You can also equip it to Lurry technically as well, or Moon of the Closed Heaven. And then while it's equipped, what you can do is, it gives it 600 attack, but the most important part about equipping this card is that it's a free card on the board for Snake Eye effects, for OSS. And in the case of Engraver, you obviously have that effect as well to remove a monster. So that's what the second effect is for. Mainly it's for this first effect to summon out Engraver from your deck. You then have Sequence. This is the actual good Fiendsmith card. It's kind of, nothing is good unless this card exists. This is what bridges everything together, really. This is a completely generic Link 2, except you need a 1 Light Fiend. So 2 monsters including a Light Fiend, and then what this does is a fusion from the graveyard. So you can summon either Desiree or Lacrima. Desiree is going to be Omni Negate, Lacrima is going to be a rank 6, essentially. Lacrima also has this burn effect in the graveyard, where you can inflict 1200 damage. This helps in time for tournaments, and it also helps just get chip damage in. There are some circumstances where you can use the graveyard effect of Tract to actually fusion summon twice, so you might as well go through Lacrima just to get that free burn and to get extra names into rotation. That is something that you will do sometimes. But yeah, Sequence, that's basically what this card does. It summons Desiree by shuffling materials from the graveyard, or it summons Lacrima. You then have the same effect as Requiem. You have the effect Equip It to something from the graveyard. This is not that good. You basically have one way to use this, and that's to make Desiree live. That's pretty much the only use of this effect. You don't really have creative uses with it the way you do with Requiem, even though it's technically the same effect. If you play this deck, you know what I mean. The lines just don't work out. You don't get to use Sequence in any creative ways, except for Desiree. That's really all this card does. And then Desiree itself, this card is an Omni Negate. Kind of. It's very close to an Omni Negate. You can't negate cards in the hand or in the graveyard, but what it can do is negate any card on the field, and it can even negate multiple cards at the same time. If you equip Sequence, then it's obviously got 2 link material, so you can negate 2 cards with Desiree. And then, even though it's not quite an Omni Negate like Baron de Fleur or something, it does make up for those differences with its extra bonuses. It has the second effect when it's sent to the graveyard to send a card on the field to the graveyard. Right? Target any card on the field, send it to the graveyard. So what you can do with this after you've used the negate is link it away with IP into SP, so that when your SP triggers, you also get the Desiree trigger to send away a card your opponent controls. So it's a nice way of turning Desiree, which is kind of just 1 negate, into 2 disruptions, right? You can use it to generate a second disruption, and because you have Sequence equipped almost every time, Sequence says that the equipped monster can't be targeted with card effects, so Desiree is also untargetable as well. So the fact that it can't be targeted, the fact that it has this float effect to send away a card, kind of makes up for the fact that it's not quite a clean Omni Negate. So yeah, this card is very, very strong on your end board. One way that you can do, one neat trick you can do with Desiree is to actually negate cards like Droplets and Dark Ruler by chaining something else to the Droplet or the Dark Ruler, like a Cold Buy or a Crossout, or an Imperm or something, and then chaining Desiree, because Desiree does not have to chain directly to the card that it wants to negate in order to negate it. So you can use this creatively, where you chain another card and then chain Desiree in order to negate Droplets. It's a cute little trick. It comes up more for the Yubel deck than it does for the Snake Eye deck, but this is something that you can keep in mind. Lacrima, this card is your alternative to Desiree. In many ways it's worse, but in many ways it's better. You're going to want to summon Lacrima sometimes instead of Desiree. And then revive Engraver, make Caesar. Caesar is basically the choice between Desiree and Caesar. If you don't have access to your Snake Eye cards, you're going to go Beatrice, that's not really any question. But when you do have access to everything, you end up having to make the choice between Caesar and Desiree in most lines. Caesar will help you play better into hand traps, because this can negate Bestials and also Nibiru, most importantly Nibiru. It's also stronger in certain matchups because this is 2 negates. This card can negate and destroy twice, so it destroys and negates. And it has more coverage against certain things than Desiree does, because Desiree can only negate cards on the field, whereas Caesar can negate anything as long as it special summons. And obviously the fact that it can use this effect twice means that it is stronger in certain matchups. So if you do know the matchup, or you suspect the matchup, you can go for Caesar. If you want your line to be more safe into Nibiru, you can go for Caesar. Even if you already have like a Sylvia negate online, what you can do is play around Nibiru plus Vela, or Nibiru plus Imperm, by still going for Caesar, so that you can negate Nibiru that way. And then if they chain the Imperm, you obviously have the other negate available as well, the Sylvia. So yeah, that's what Lacrima is for. It's for making these rank 6s. Lacrima has this other effect to burn when it's sent to the graveyard. That comes up in time sometimes, and it can help push for lethal on turn 3 easier as well. Not that you really need much help in that situation, but it can come up. Caesar, this card negates special summons, and then there's negates effects that special summon, and then it has some other effects, but they're DDD specific, so they don't matter for this deck. Beatrice, the point of Beatrice is to send Snake Eye Ash. Beatrice is obviously a generic rank 6. You're then going to make Princess, you're going to revive the Snake Eye Ash. And that's pretty much all Beatrice does in this build. You'll notice that we're not playing any fancy Beatrice techs like these, like the rollback plus Mayakashi trap. We're not playing this turn skip combo, because Beatrice has it only attaches once to use her effect, and it's a quick effect. What you can do is use it twice. You can send something on your turn, and then something else on the opponent's turn. So a combination like rollback plus Mayakashi trap is gonna skip your opponent's turn basically, and that is a nice little combo. But in my opinion, it's not needed. If you're going to use Beatrice and you're going to combo anyway, you're not going to get hand trapped, you're going to send Snake Eye Ash, you're going to win that game. You're basically going to win that game, probably, because you've comboed. And the way that this format works, the way this deck works, is that if you combo, you don't lose. That is a reasonable thing to assume. Even though it's not technically impossible, you might as well assume it's impossible in your theory crafting, in your deck building, because it is basically impossible. So we don't need to win more with Beatrice, we don't need to play bricks like rollback. It's better to just play your engine. And then the last card here for Fiendsmith is Moon of the Closed Heaven. This is so you can turn any 2 random bodies into a Light Fiend, which can then make Requiem. There is another effect on Closed Moon, which is that you can target a monster and then use that monster as material. So this works very well with Goddess. Right, this works very well with Underworld Goddess, because what Underworld Goddess does is use another monster. So you can use Moon to target one monster, and then the condition on Underworld Goddess is that you can use another monster. So you can actually use 2 monsters to summon Underworld Goddess of your opponents, right? 2 of your opponent's monsters, then the Moon itself, and then just 1 other monster, 1 other link material from your field to go into Underworld Goddess. That's very, very strong. But unfortunately you don't have the room for it. We cannot fit a goddess into this extra deck, so that's why we're not playing it. So this second effect is not relevant, but if you do have more room in the extra deck and you do have, or you do really want to play the goddess, you can do that, and it is pretty good as well. But really the main use of this is just Light Fiend, yeah. And then the last card in the extra deck is Snake Eyes Doomed Dragon. I think initially people didn't really look at this card as being useful, but it turns out without Lacrima, Doomed Dragon helps fix a lot of the combos so that you can still do the same end board and the same lines that play around the same hand traps. This card essentially replaces Lacrima, as weird as it sounds. You'll see when we get to the combos shortly that this card is very useful. You need this to have enough bodies on the board. The way this works is that it just contact fuses from the back row. So any 2 face-up monster cards in your spell and trap zones can just be sent to essentially contact fuse into this. Right? So any Snake Eye Poplar targets, anything you put in the back row with Poplar, anything you put in the back row with Temple, Snake Eyes Diabellstar, or even the equips, right? Requiem and Sequence. These are monster cards, and when they equip to monsters, they will be able to be fused into a Doomed Dragon if you want to. Even Flamberge itself can put things into your back row. That's going to give you a free extender. And when this card is summoned, it can remove something. You can target a monster on the field and place it in the back row. So this card can basically push into a board by targeting a monster your opponent controls, pushing it away. And it's 3k, so it is very good at playing into a board, so you can attack for lethal pretty easily. It also comes up quite a lot versus Nibiru. If you hold this until after your opponent is baited into using Nibiru, then you can get rid of the Nibiru body for free, which would have otherwise been pretty strong against you because of the way this deck typically ends, right? It depends on the exact situation, but suppose that you bait Nibiru by threatening to make a Caesar, your opponent drops Nibiru, you can then go into Doomed Dragon, push away that Nibiru, and then you're still free to end on Appaloosa or IP, and they're not going to be immediately forced by the Nibiru body on the board because you've gotten rid of it, thanks to the Doomed Dragon, right? So that's very good for that. But the main use for it going first is that it's a body. You just summon it, it's a free body, and that helps you complete combos that you would have otherwise needed Lacrima in order to do. So yeah, that's it for the extra deck. It's very, very tight. There is a lot of cards you can see that we're about to talk about, which you would like to play, but I decided not to, just because of space. Pretty much every single card here, every extra deck card here is the same reason we're not playing it. It's just space. We don't have space in this really, really tight extra deck. So then the last cards to talk about are these considerations I've put in the side deck here. Starting with Lacrima, this isn't really a consideration for the main deck. If this card was legal, you would play it. In a heartbeat, this goes into the deck. By playing Lacrima, you essentially make it so that Moon is pure full combo by itself. If you actually just have like 2 hand traps, a Nibiru plus normal summon Ash, Moon doesn't do anything right now, doesn't really go anywhere. You just summon Engraver and set up a little bit of follow-up. You don't actually get all the way to the full combo. You don't actually have 2 bodies to get to sequence and then go Desiree or anything like that. But with Lacrima, you do. Once we get Lacrima, any 2 bodies can go into Beatrice, into Princess, into Revive Snake Eye Ash if you want, or Desiree, or Caesar. And that's what Lacrima does. It makes Tract full combo, Lurie full combo, the Lacrima itself is full combo. Engraver is already full combo, but with Lacrima in the deck, you add so many more full combos into the deck. These 2 cards, this card is another full combo, and then any 2 monsters that you can scrape together become full combo as well. It's a massive boost to consistency. The way that it works is that on summon, it basically just sends Engraver from the deck to the graveyard. And that's it. There's another effect which isn't really relevant for this build because you're not playing Fiendsmith in Paradise, but technically this second effect is a little bit of follow-up and recursion and protection from being OTK'd, but you're mainly playing Lacrima for this first effect. You basically just get a free extra material into rotation. You summon this card, send Engraver, and then Engraver can revive itself. It's an extra name in rotation, and it lets you special summon the Engraver guaranteed with the graveyard effect, whereas right now without Lacrima, this graveyard effect doesn't come up every time because you don't necessarily have enough Light Fiends to make use of it. A lot of the time you will just shuffle Engraver back to summon Desiree, or you will summon it to your field and overlay into Caesar. And while it's under Caesar, it's obviously not getting back into the graveyard that turn unless you use the Caesar, so you're not going to get to use it then either. But with Lacrima, you guarantee that you get to use Engraver's effect every single line, which is an extra body and it's an extra name, and the way that works out is that that's just really, really good. You no longer would need to play this. It buffs every single one of your lines, adds consistency, takes your bricks and turns them into full combo. It's really, really good to play Lacrima once we get it. Other Fiendsmith cards, like Fiendsmith in Paradise, this is something that other Fiendsmith decks play, especially in the TCG right now. It works very well with Lacrima. Even though this card is good with Lacrima, I'm not sure that this build specifically wants to play it. Depending on what the format looks like, we might not get Lacrima until after some more hits, but suppose that it's exactly the same, and we get Lacrima and we can play it in the deck. I'm not sure you play Paradise still, just because it's an extra brick and this deck is already winning the game. You don't need, your board doesn't need any more strength, and that's what this card offers. The way this card really works is that it's the graveyard effect. Your opponent special summons a monster while it's in your graveyard, you can banish it and then send a Fiendsmith monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard. And what that would do is send Desiree, which has the effect when it's sent to the graveyard to shuffle another Light Fiend and then send a card away. This doesn't need to go from the field, it can be sent straight from the extra deck. So Fiendsmith in Paradise sending it is an extra disruption that you can set up for free with just Lacrima. And that's really, really strong. But the problem is that it's not really that good on its own. If you just normal summon Lacrima in your combo, you're not sending Paradise. That would be kinda dumb. It's much better to just send Engraver and combo, and then save the Paradise send for the opponent's turn. The second time you use Lacrima, you would leave Lacrima in the graveyard, use its second effect, which says during the opponent's turn, you can special summon it, right? Or shuffle this card into the deck and then special summon that monster. But that's the same thing basically, because you're going to shuffle back Requiem, special summon, you're going to shuffle back Lacrima, summon Requiem, and then Requiem's just going to tribute itself right away to summon Lacrima back from the deck. And that's going to send the Paradise. Then you can do the Paradise graveyard effect. So it's a secret extra disruption that you can access by playing Lacrima and Paradise. But like I said, turn 1 for comboing, you're just going to send Engraver, so if you're comboing, you don't need extra power on your end board. You're not going to play this just to add extra power to your end board. So I don't think you play this in this build, but in other Fiendsmith builds, this is obviously very good. It works very well when you get to play a second Desiree, because you can still summon one and then still have this line available. And there's no way that this Snake Eye extra deck has room for a second Desiree. Not unless things change a lot. So for now, I don't think you're going to play this, even when we get Lacrima. There's also Fiendsmith Sanct. This is another attempt at making the deck more consistent. The only problem with this, you can search for it with Engraver, discard and add a Fiendsmith spell or trap, but the problem is that this is kind of just the same as Tract, where you summon a random Light Fiend, and that Light Fiend doesn't do anything. It's only if you start with Engraver that it really matters, right? One Light Fiend is not full combo by itself, so Sanct is not very good, and that's all this does. It just summons a Light Fiend, which you can then turn into Requiem. Once Requiem is full combo by itself, once any Light Fiend is full combo, maybe Sanct is considerable, but to be honest, probably still not, because you would have enough starters. You could play more Lacrima if you wanted to, you could play more Tract if you wanted to. You would never go so far as to play Sanct. The Mayakashi in rollback, we talked about this. This is a Beatrice option. I don't think it's worth playing bricks in the main deck, like I said before, and again, just with the Lacrima, your end board is strong enough. If you make it, you're winning the game, so you don't need to play more power. That's more of a side deck option, which you can try maybe as a means of countering Maxi, so that you can still FDK your opponent, basically. Or if you can guarantee going first. But for now, I'm going to cut it. I don't want to play it. And then they have the extra deck cards. All of these are the same. We would like to play these, but there's no room. So Linkuriboh, turns out you don't need this for any combos. The only combo which is definitely better with Linkuriboh is a normal summon Poplar 1-card combo. But you can still do a combo without Linkuriboh, so I decided that it's not worth it. We're not going to draw Poplar that often, so I'm just going to cut the Linkuriboh. Raging Phoenix and Zelantis, this is so good for going second. I miss this so much when I play this deck, but unfortunately, it doesn't matter. Like I said, when you go second in this deck, in the mirror match, or Fiendsmith mirror matches, your win condition is to simply stop your opponent from playing with hand traps, and if you fail to do that, if they combo, you probably don't win. Even if you draw a pretty good hand, if they have a full combo or close to a full combo, they're going to stop you. So even if you have this in your extra deck, it's not really going to make a difference. You're not going to get to OTK them. The only time where you would consider playing this is maybe in a side deck where you can guarantee going second, so they definitely will have some sort of impact, just because, well, going second, it's always stronger to have these, right? There's certain cards you can take out of this main deck that don't do anything going first, like maybe IP, or maybe the Beatrice, and you can side in these, but in the main deck there's not enough room for them, so we can't play them. There's Ambler Whale, which is the better Link 4 than Raging Phoenix when it comes to going first, but again, we don't have it. We much prefer to link off our princess into Heater so that we can then go Appaloosa. We don't really care about having Ambler Whale. Dark, you don't really play Dark if you don't play Linkuriboh, because there aren't enough Dark monsters readily available to make. And this card also doesn't really make much sense when we're not playing the Zelantis package either, because that's mainly what Dark would be used for. It's just Link climbing going second. Then there's Seline. Seline is an interesting card. This is a card that I nearly played. I nearly want this in the extra deck, and I might even test a little bit more with it. The reason why Seline would be good is because it allows you to turn Heater plus one monster into a Link 3 without wasting material. There are some combo lines where you're going to be very clogged on monsters on the board. You're going to have so many monsters, and you really want to turn one of them plus Heater, one monster plus Heater into a Link 3, and then summon out another monster, and then turn that monster plus Seline into Appaloosa. It's just a way of getting around really blocked board states where you have so many monsters. And the other thing that Seline does, which is probably more important, is revive Diabellstar from the graveyard. And that can be good because it means that it's now a target for Beatrice. If you play Seline, an option that you now have for Beatrice is that you don't have to use Beatrice just to access your Snake Eye cards when you don't have them. You can actually use it to access the Azamina cards as well. So, obviously Princess can't revive Diabellstar because she's a dark and not a fire, but Seline revives any spellcaster, and Diabellstar is a spellcaster. So let's say you have Snake Eye Ash and you want to go for your Snake Eye line and you go for Beatrice instead of Caesar or Desiree. You're going to go Beatrice, you can send Diabellstar, then you can go Seline, revive the Diabellstar, and that gets you to Deception, which gets you to your Ilia Sylvia negate, which is a nice extra way of bridging the archetypes together. If you didn't hard draw access to Azamina cards, you can use it to access a negate as well. But it's not necessary. You have plenty of other options. If you're comboing and you're getting to Beatrice and you're also getting to Caesar, Desiree, you can probably just pass turn and win because you've comboed. So we don't need Seline. Birch, honestly, I've seen people playing Birch. I don't really get it. The one reason I can see a use case for Birch is because you now have so much more access to searching with OSS, your Snake Eye Ash. the main lines, the way the combos work is that if you draw Diabellstar or Deception, you're going to get OSS Search, right? Which is going to be, it's the graveyard effect that you get, not the on-field effect. And that searches for either Poplar or Snake Eye Ash, which renders Bonfire completely useless. Right, if you search for Snake Eye Ash and then normal summon it, then you're going to get Poplar, and if you search for Poplar, then you've triggered Poplar. The Bonfire is kind of pointless at this point, so I can see a use for Birch, where you just make use of when you have a Diabellstar or a Deception line, and then also a Bonfire, but I personally just think it's better to take the win. You know, you're going to win if you full combo, so just activate Bonfire, try to search for Snake Eye Ash. If they ash you, that's great, you have full combo anyway. If they don't ash you, that's great, you get the combo. I don't really see a use for Birch, it seems a little win more. Subversion, sorry, this is an option that pure Snake Eye decks have played in the past, just another target for Poplar. I don't think it's worth it, you're not going to win going second unless you hand trap them, so don't play a card that isn't either a starter, a brick that you have to play, or a hand trap. That is a good rule to deck build by. And this isn't any of those three, so you're not playing it. And then Droll. Droll is a hand trap that I considered playing. I think Droll plays very nicely into the minigame because it actually contributes to how you can play through Max C and Fool Us, right? Because what you can do is actually Droll yourself and then still go for a lot of the combo lines. If you've resolved Snake Eye Ash and Poplar, a lot of your stuff doesn't need to search anymore, right? You can still go for special summons from the deck for Oak and Flamberge, float Flamberge, Princess, climb into Appaloosa, place IP in the back row. Fiendsmith can still special summon from the deck, you don't need to search at all in the Fiendsmith lines. Still resolve Sequence to summon Desiree or Caesar. So you can still do a lot under Droll. So if you give your opponent 2 or 3 draws for a Max C, and then you draw them, they don't draw anymore, and then you full combo, you're probably still in a good position to win the game. The only issue with that is that if they do have another hand trap in those 3 or 4 draws, they can very much stop you, right? And if they have another hand trap to begin with, then the draw is just very bad because they can easily hand trap you. So I don't really like Droll for that, but it is theoretically pretty good. It's also theoretically pretty good going second because it's kind of similar to Max C and Fool Us in that it has the ability to have lasting impact, right? If your opponent has a whole hand full of extenders, Ash and Veiler and Imperm, like I said before, can be very easily invalidated by an extender, whereas Droll has lasting impact. Droll is going to stop them from searching no matter what. The only issue with that is that it's not always good. Like I just pointed out, we can do so many things under Droll, so there's a chance that Droll on its own isn't that good either, whereas a resolved Max C or a resolved Fool Us definitely wins you a lot of games. So overall, I just found Droll to be too clunky. It's always the case with Droll. It sounds good in theory, but in practice it just sucks because it's bad to draw for turn, it's bad in a grind game, it's bad into so many matchups where your opponent just sets and passes. Yeah, it's not very good. And then the last thing here is Garunix. This is just representing the Fire King cards. Just to point out real quick why you would play this build over the established Fire King build. Because the Fire King build is obviously like one of the best decks, it has been for a while. Why would this build be any better? There's like 2 or 3 reasons for that. First of all, I think it's to do with the fact that this deck pushes through hand traps better. Engraver is a push through hand traps, Tract is technically a push through hand traps, Deception is now a push through hand traps, and then two bodies into Moon is technically a bit of a push through hand traps as well. Fire King doesn't have that many pushes, so this deck is better into hand traps. This deck's end board is also stronger, you have Omni Negates, whereas the Fire King build has 0 Omni Negates. So what happens in the Fire King build, at least the previous Fire King build, nowadays they can probably play the Azamina cards as well, but what happened was that you could easily activate Thrust or Grass, and then just win the game anyway into a full board, especially if you were playing Tia. You would just resolve Grass and beat a Fire King board because they couldn't negate Grass. Whereas this deck can definitely negate Grass, you have Desiree and Sylvia. So yeah, it's a stronger end board. I also think that there is just less bricks in the deck. We do play quite a few bricks. Hallowed Azamina is a brick, Temple is kind of a brick, Oak and Flamberge, Diabellstar, Tract and Lurie. It's a lot of bricks when you break it down, but the Fire King deck had even more. Right, you had to play Garunix, Double Kirin, both kind of bricks. Avata, also kind of a brick. Skyburn was also kind of a brick. You still had to play Oak and Flamberge anyway, right? Those are in your deck as well. So you had a lot more bricks in the Fire King build. So yeah, overall I just think that this build is the stronger way to play Snake Eye. So yeah. Anyway, that's it. That's it for the card by card. Let's go ahead and look at some combos. And then one more thing real quick before I go into the combos is that I wanted to talk about this deck list overall in general. You can see that it's 43 cards. The reason why I thought it was good to play slightly more than 40 is because two reasons. Number one, you want to fit in as many hand traps as possible. If you think about how many starters we have, it's really just on the edge of being good enough, so I don't think you can cut starters from the deck realistically. So if you are going to trim this deck down to 40, it would be hand traps that you take out, right? You can't take out your bricks, you can't take out Hallowed Azamina and Lurie, Flamberge, right? Diabellstar. You need these. So the only things you have left to cut are hand traps. So you could cut Nibiru, and you could say cut like a Vela down to 2 to make it 40, but here's the thing, your deck is like weaker now. It's actually weaker. Even though it's 40 and it's technically more consistent, you have less chance of opening a hand trap going second than previously. Even though the deck is smaller, you took out hand traps, so you have less chance of drawing your win condition, which is multiple hand traps. You technically have more chance of opening Max C or Fuelas, so that is one advantage of trying to cut it down to 40, but you do take away from your second win condition, which is to draw multiple other hand traps. There was something that I was considering for a 40 card deck. I was considering taking out the Bestials and then just playing a Talents. And the idea with this build is that it's trying to focus mainly on the Max C minigame. So we're trying to win the Max C minigame the most often by drawing them going second in 40 the most often. And then by going first, we're obviously maximizing our chance of drawing Ash or Cold Buy to negate their Maxi and Fuelas. And the Talents also helps with the Fuelas and the Maxi because it's a punish that you can have. You can look at their hand, for example, and there's not really another good hand trap that contributes to this instead of the Talents, so I thought I'll just play the Talents. This was a deck list that I considered instead of the more hand trap heavy one. However, I'm honestly not certain that I prefer this, so either of them looks good to me. I think the Bestial version might be slightly better, but they're both pretty much equal in my opinion. So yeah, anyway, let's go look at some combos. So this is the spreadsheet that I've made. It's a combination of a couple of spreadsheets that I've made. It's a pre-lacrima one here. You can see I have pre-lacrima here. Here's a bunch of combos for how to play the deck without lacrima. And I also have post-lacrima combos here, which is actually a more detailed guide on a lot more combos. You can see there's a lot more on here. And there's also some non-Azamina lines here, which is what you can do if you don't want to play the Azamina cards in the deck, if you just want to play Fiendsmith Snake Eye. There's some lines for what you can do with your Diabellstar and Wanted here. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at the pre-lacrima mainly, because this is how the deck currently plays. Starting with our 1-card combos, we have the Ash 1-card combo. This is the basics of the deck. You can see that it ends on 7 disruptions here, which is a lot of disruptions. For 1 Ash uninterrupted, we're ending on Desiree plus a 3-material Appaloosa, a Flamberge with an IP in the back row, and a Princess in the graveyard. So IP in the back row means that we're getting to SP Little Knight, and obviously Flamberge is a fire monster, so Princess is live. So that's 7 disruptions total. You can see on the spreadsheet there's some little notes about the combo here. We can see that it plays around an early Nibiru, but it is weak to a late Nibiru. And there's also a note here that says it can make Caesar instead of Desiree. This is always a choice. Like I said, with sequence, you pretty much always have a choice between making either Desiree or Caesar. So pretty much every single time it says Desiree on these combos here, on these end boards, it can also be Caesar. The only times where it's not going to be Caesar is when there's also a Caesar on the end board as well. Right, like this line, for example, ends on both of them. But most of the time, when you see Desiree, it can also be Caesar, and that would play better into a late Nibiru, whereas Desiree plays more into Nibiru. So anyway, let's look at this line. So starting with just one Snake Eye Ash, and you can see that we don't require any discards. The nice thing about the Snake Eye cards, unlike the Diabellstar cards and the Azamina lines, you don't have to start with a discard, you can just play with just the Snake Eye Ash. So we're going to go for an extremely standard line first, which is Ash into Poplar, and then we're going to get Temple. Like I said, we're not getting OSS, our main search is Temple, and the main card we're going to place with Temple is Diabellstar. So here, this is how the line goes. You can probably immediately find variations in other guides and other content creators' opinions. You can probably immediately find a difference here, but what I like to do is use Snake Eye Ash to send away the Diabellstar. We go for Oak, and then Oak brings back the Ash. Now, even though we discarded the Diabellstar to the graveyard, we've sent it to the graveyard, I should say, we can place it back with Poplar effect, so we're not wasting it. Now we're going to use Oak, and we're going to send away the Temple to summon a Birch Dragon. The reason we're doing this will become apparent later. The reason why we're not placing a card into the back row with Poplar first and then sending that away instead of the Temple is because we're going to need our cards in the back row later on to summon the Doomed Dragon. Here, by going for Oak right away now, we are playing better into Nibiru. This is the 5th summon. This Birch Dragon is now summon number 5. So if they want a Nibiru right away, we're obviously going to be fine. We're going to have a token, the Birch will float, we'll have 3 bodies in total. That means we have access to Princess, the full Fiendsmith line if we want to. So we're going to be fine if they Nibiru now. So what we're going to do now is go into Moon. Any 2 bodies makes Moon of the Closed Heaven. And then the Poplar will trigger and we're going to place back the Diabellstar. It's important that it has to be the Diabellstar. This card is essentially just an extra body while it's in the back row. It'll replace itself with something else and then summon itself. So always place the Diabellstar if you can. This is always the best card to place with Poplar if you're not sure. So then we're going to go into Requiem. This is now the Fiendsmith line, summon Engraver from the deck. And now here we're going to use the Snake Eyes Diabellstar to place anything in the back row. This isn't going to matter because we're going to send this away very soon. But generally when you don't have Temple on the field, and you have to place something random into the back row, I think Snake Eye Ash is the best one. Just because when Birch floats and you revive Poplar and Oak, these cards have actual effects, right? Poplar has the floating effect, and it even can search for OSS. Oak can obviously revive the Poplar over and over again, whereas the Ash is dead. The Ash is a vanilla monster at this point. Without any more Snake Eyes in the deck, this card does nothing. So if you are going to lose it forever because it's in the back row and there's no Temple, it's best to be Snake Eye Ash. But it's not going to matter here because we're going to equip the Requiem using its graveyard effect to Engraver, and now this is why we had to send away the Temple instead of sending a back row for Oak, is because we want to send both of these for Doomed Dragon. Alright, this is important. This can use not just Snake Eye cards in the back row, but also equipped Fiendsmith cards. That's very important. Now this just acts as an extra body. We're going to link 2 into sequence, and this is how we make our Desiree. We have 3 materials, but we could have summoned Lacrima and gone for Caesar, but instead we chose Desiree. Now we link into Princess. You can see here why we're weak to Nibiru. The Birch is floating now, and we're going to summon out 2 bodies here. If we get hit with Nibiru here, the Desiree can't do anything to stop it, whereas Caesar would be a good way to counter a Nibiru. So now we're going to use Princess, revive the Birch. This is always a key line. You want to make sure that your Birch is on the end board because we're trying to use it, right, to summon IP. We have to equip the sequence to Desiree. This is very important. Don't forget about this. And then in this line, we're going to use Desiree to negate our Princess. Now that Princess is negated, we can link into Masquerena. We can summon a Dark. And then we're going to link again into a 3 material Appaloosa. Then we have to place the Masquerena, don't forget to do this either. And that's the end of the combo. We have Appaloosa, Desiree, Princess in the Graveyard, and Flamberge into IP. So it's pretty good. We have a lot of follow-up. Yeah, it's pretty strong. One thing that you will notice about this line earlier on is that we had all 5 zones available. So if you want to do this line exactly isn't going to work if you have like an Azamina card, if you have an Ilia Sylvia on your board from a different combo, you're not going to be able to do this exact line because you did require all zones. So you have to make up an extra line which will be slightly different, but we'll get into what to do with the other cards shortly. There's another option here. This is another option for Ash 1-card combo. So I said that this first line plays into Nibiru pretty bad. It's good into early Nibiru, but really bad into a late Nibiru. If you make Caesar, then you don't lose to that late Nibiru, but you can still be hit with Nibiru before you overlay for Caesar. So if you remember exactly when we summoned the Desiree, if instead we tried to go for Caesar and we got hit with Nibiru, we would float the Flamberge, but it's not completely Nibiru proof. This next line, this is an attempt to be even stronger into Nibiru. So we can see that we're ending differently on a 2-material Appaloosa this time. Caesar guaranteed because we're trying to beat Nibiru, and then the rest is the same. So we're still getting 7 disruptions. We're getting, this time we can completely play around Nibiru. The only caveat to this is that we have to play Linkuriboh as well as the Doomed Dragon. Generally, I think Linkuriboh and Doomed Dragon take up the same slot in the extra deck because it's very tight. So if you are going to go for this line, your extra deck has to be very specific. So this is how this line works. We'll go through it a little quicker because it is largely the same. Yep, so we're going to start the same, and this time we're going to send the Temple away for the Ash. This is important, and instead of sending the Diabellstar, you're going to send the Temple right away, and instead of summoning Ogre, you're going to go straight into Flamberge. So now you're immediately safe from an early Nibiru. You're going to link away the Flamberge, and you're going to go into Moon. Now here's the important part. You're not going to activate the Flamberge. You're just going to use Poplar, and you're going to place the Flamberge in the back row. So now, what you've essentially set up here, because you have 2 cards in the back row, you've set up a Doomed Dragon whenever you want. You've basically stored your Flamberge float, because you have 2 monsters in the graveyard that it can revive, and you can summon it, you can send it to the graveyard by summoning the Doomed Dragon whenever you want. So you basically have stored your Flamberge float. So now what you're going to do is use the Fiendsmith line to do what it's very good at, which is making a Caesar. So you're going to make the second body using the Diabellstar, and you're going to go into Lacrima, add the Engraver to the hand. Now this is important. Instead of reviving it to the field and then making Caesar, you can make a slightly better line by going for Tract, sending Lurie, or adding Lurie and then discarding Lurie, special summoning the Lurie. Then you can link it into Linkuriboh. Now this is important because now you have an extra Light Fiend in the graveyard. You can use the Engraver effect to revive itself, and then make Caesar. And essentially what you've allowed yourself to do here is get a free extra body. If you imagine instead we just went Lacrima, revive Engraver, we would overlay into Caesar, and this Linkuriboh wouldn't be here. So you've allowed yourself to have an extra body. Now you're completely safe from Nibiru because you have Caesar. And if you were to be Nibiru before summoning the Caesar, let's say right before, when you had these 2 level 6s, they saw that you're about to go Caesar, so they say, okay, I'm going to Nibiru now. What would happen is you have a token. You can then spend your stored Flamberge in the back row, summon the Doom Dragon, that's a second body. The Flamberge will float, summon 2 more bodies. You have 4 bodies on the field. You've yet to go through Princess. You've yet to go through IP. So you can do a very standard Snake Eye line. And very importantly, you're also going to be able to push the Nibiru body on the board back into the back row with the Doomed Dragon on summon trigger. And that way you're not going to be easily threatened by the Nibiru in their opponent's main phase, right? They can just attempt it in the main phase, and that kind of forces your IP. So yeah, it's pretty strong. to play around Nibiru like this. But let's say you do get to the Caesar, now you know you're safe from Nibiru, so you can send these anyway. Summon out the Doomed Dragon, float the Flamberge. Again, we've covered every single zone here, so if you were thinking about going for this exact line while you had another body on the board, it's not possible. You will have to find another way around it. And now here you can go for the Princess, revive the Flamberge, and this is your heater into Appaloosa. Masquerena first, don't forget this. And now we go Masquerena. Appaloosa. Place the Masquerena and pass. So the end board, it ends up being relatively similar. It's actually a little bit weaker because in the other line we had a 3 material Appaloosa, but we did play better into Nibiru, so generally this line would be worth it. Okay, so next we have the Bonfire 1-card combo. As you might expect, this is exactly the same as Ash. The only difference is, like it says here, we do play harder into Draw. So if you activate Ash, if you normal summon Ash, and you get hit with Draw, you're going to have 2 bodies on the field. The Poplar will still summon. But if you start with Bonfire, you're getting Drawled, and it's going to be a lot worse because you can't search with the Ash. But other than that, the line is exactly the same. It's actually a lot better to start with Bonfire in most hands in practice, just because you no longer need Bonfire as often to get to your Ash because of how the Azamina lines work with how they search for Snake Eye Ash. So Bonfire is actually a very good Ash bait if you were to start with it. So there's ups and downs to having Bonfire instead of a Snake Eye Ash. Generally, I think it's a little bit of a worse card these days, but it's fine. It's still fine. It's the exact same line. We're going to go through it very quick. It's Ash into Poplar, search for Temple, activate Temple, go for Diabellstar, send away the Diabellstar for Oak. Then you're going to send away the Temple. This plays around Nibiru. Place the Diabellstar in the back row, and you're going to splash something. You can see this is the first line that we showed before, where we used the Doomed Dragon early. Before going for the Fiendsmith, I'm going to make the Desiree into the Princess, float, revive, making sure we have enough zones, equip the sequence, negate the Princess, don't forget the IP, make the Appaloosa. This is the first line that we showed, but of course you can still go for the other line where we float the Flamberge later, where we place it in the back row and store it. If you're playing Linkaribo, you can go for that line to play better into Nibiru, but if you're not playing Linkaribo, then this is the next best thing. I think this is your next best line. And of course the Desiree can be Caesar. So next we have a Poplar 1-card combo. This is a weaker board. You can see that this ends on only 3 disruptions. And it says that without Linkaribo, 1-card Poplar combo is limited. And it is quite limited. This is IP plus Flamberge, Oak in the back row, and Princess in the graveyard. So it's 2 disruptions with SP, and then 1 more disruption with Princess. And of course, you play harder into hand traps. You can't really play around things with Poplar. This is the best you can do without playing a Linkaribo. So we're going to start with Poplar, and we're going to search for OSS. Since we're not playing Linkaribo, we can't link it off right away, we just have to send it from the field. And then we're going to summon Oak. Now here, because we need to revive the Poplar with the Oak, we're not going to be able to trigger the Poplar. So we just have to revive. And then here, we still can't do anything. If we go Flamberge, we can't link it off. So we have no choice but to go for our Fiendsmith line instead. Now we float our Poplar, place itself in the back row. Now we go through the Fiendsmith line. Placing the Requiem is important because that's going to let us make the Doomed Dragon. Now we have that second body available, which is what you need to make the Fiendsmith line good. Right? With any 2 bodies, without Engraver, second Engraver in the graveyard, you need that second body in order to make sequence. So now we have it, we can go into sequence. This summons Lacrima. Lacrima adds Engraver back to our hand. We haven't used its effect yet, so we can get Tract, and then Tract can get Lurie. Now we're going into Princess. Revive the oak. Now if you remember, we haven't used our oak's second effect yet, so now we can use it, send away our princess to get to our birch. And now we can shuffle back, summon out the Engraver because we sent away our firelock, and we can make Masquerader here. Obviously you could make Caesar, that's 2 rank 6s, but I think it's stronger to make Masquerader here. And then don't forget to use the Lacrima whenever you can, just to recycle and just to burn 1200. And then place Oak in the back row because your IP is on the board, so you might as well spend your Flamberge on something else. It's not very strong, and if you do play Linkuriboh, you can make a stronger combo, but I don't actually recommend playing Linkuriboh. I think it's well worth it. You don't draw one Poplar combo very often, so it's fine. The fact that you can still do something, I think, is important. If you want to go for this other line with the Ash that uses Linkuriboh, then you can see how Linkuriboh can start being important. But if you're not playing it, then this is the best that you have access to. Next is Wanted, plus 1 discard, plus 1 monster. So you can see the end board this time is really good. We have a Desiree, a Free Material Appaloosa, and a Sylvia. Sylvia is the Azamina Omni negate. So we have an extra negate. Then we also have the Flamberge, the Princess, the IP in the back row. We also have Temple and Oak in the back row, so we get to keep Temple on the board as well. Whenever you get to keep Temple on the board, it's stronger into droplets, because if they negate your Flamberge, for example, and they don't let you summon IP, you can still use Temple to summon out the IP later. So you have a stronger board into droplets, or into Dark Ruler, if you have Temple on the board. And you also get to draw 1 in this line because we're going to use Wanted. See, it's 8 disruptions, very strong. It also plays around Nibiru. Anytime you start with the Azamina line, you pretty much beat Nibiru for free, because you have an Omni negate before 5 summons. So this is how the line goes. So we can see that we're giving ourselves a random discard and a random tribute, so a random monster in the hand. This is the downside of the Azamina starters, is that they do require you to go minus. We're going to start with Wanted in the draw phase, just to play better into draw. We're going to go main phase, summon the Diabellstar, and you have to discard your non-monster, because you need the monster later. So you're going to set Deception. This card lets you tribute a monster, this is why we needed to keep it. And then we're going to tribute the monster from the hand, to add the Hallowed Azamina. And then we use the Hallowed Azamina, send away the Deception, and to summon Arcielago. We trigger and we search for OSS. Now instead of just activating the OSS, which is very tempting because it is full combo, there's actually a better line, which is to link away, to summon Masquerader. And then what you're going to do is activate the Hallowed Azamina to return the Arcielago from the graveyard, to add it to the hand, right? This effect. So we might as well link away the fusion before adding it back, because we can send it away from the field, but also from the graveyard. So it's better to link it off, you get value from it. Now here we can use it again because it's not a once per turn. And we can summon the second fusion, which is the Ilia Sylvia. This is your 4th summon, so you're now insulated from Nibiru. And you have OSS in the graveyard, plus Diabellstar in the graveyard, which means you can use it to search for Snake Eye Ash. You've not used your normal summon yet, so now you can just go ahead and do the normal combo. Ash into Poplar, and because we're searching Temple with Poplar, we're not impeded at all by the fact that we used OSS. We can just go Temple, and we can place Diabellstar. Now here, do remember what I said about how the other lines fill up the board, right? They use every zone. So having the Sylvia here does mean that we have to get a bit more creative. However, for this line specifically, we're already even further ahead because we have the Masquerader for free. A lot of the time, you're not going to have this. If you're just starting Snake Eye Ash, you've got an empty extra monster zone. But we already have the Masquerader, so we're actually very far ahead in terms of value. We're going to summon the Oak. We're going to use the Oak. And then we're going to link away for the Fiendsmith line. And we're going to place back the Diabellstar because we haven't used it yet. We'll go Requiem. Then we're going to equip the Requiem. Equipping the Requiem here is giving us a free extra send for Oak. We don't need to send Temple this time. We don't need to use the Requiem for Doom's Dragon because we already have enough bodies. So we're just going to summon the Flamberge like this. Now we can link it away. It's important to do it now before summoning anything else because we need these 3 zones available to summon back our Flamberge monsters and then also the Flamberge itself with Princess. And then we're going to link away. Notice how we're going to link away into Heater, and then we're going to also try to go for Sequence. We're going to do all of this before activating Flamberge to place IP, just to play slightly better into Bizdeals. Suppose that your opponent has like a couple of Bizdeals, and you try to target the IP now. They can very easily get around your negate, right? You can negate it once, and then if they have another Bizdeal, they can still banish the IP. So all we're doing is holding the Flamberge until after we've gotten to Appaloosa, just so that it's even safer into like double hand trap combinations. So yeah, we're gonna go for Sequence. We're gonna shuffle back. This is Desiree, and of course, I'll say it again, and this will probably be the last time I say it. Every time you summon Desiree, it can also be Caesar. So then we're going to use the Wanted. Now here, this is a very interesting use of the Wanted. What you want to do is get all of the Snake Eye bricks and Fiendsmith bricks out of the deck before using the Wanted draw. This is just to maximize your chance of drawing a non-engine card. So we're going to put back the Banished OSS, and we're going to draw. So this is most likely to be a hand trap if you've already gotten every Snake Eye card out of the deck and every Fiendsmith card out of the deck. The reason why we summoned the Desiree first is because Engraver is actually a good draw here, because we haven't used its in-hand effect, and we haven't used Tract. We haven't been through Lurie. So Engraver is actually a really good draw. It will actually extend us a lot. So we're actually going to not use the draw until we put that Engraver in our graveyard back into the deck to summon Desiree. Then we're going to draw, and if we drew the Engraver, it would be a really good extender. So next we're going to use the Diabellstar, place the Oak in the back row, and now we can make the Appaloosa. It's 3 materials. Now that we have Appaloosa, we can use the Sequence, right, to play better around a Bystial. Well, we had to just link off the Sequence anyway, but now that we have the Appaloosa, we can play better with the Flamberge to place the IP. I actually miss it here, for some reason I forgot to do it, but we should have the IP in the back row as well. And then we have Deception in the end phase. This card does set itself, don't forget about this. In Master Duel it's very hard to forget this because you get prompted twice for it. But yeah, this is the end board. It's very, very strong. We have 3 material Appaloosa. This is an Omni Negate. Desiree is basically an Omni Negate. Flamberge into IP is 2 more disruptions, and Princess is a disruption as well. So it's very, very strong. Okay, so moving on to Diabellstar, +1 discard, plus a monster. This is exactly the same as Wanted. Makes sense, you're just going to do the exact same line, that's why the end board is the same. You're just missing out on the draw 1. So yeah, it's the same 8 disruptions. I'm not going to go through the replay because it's exactly the same. And then Deception, +1 discard, +1 monster, also ends on the exact same board. So this is why I say that Wanted, Diabellstar, and Deception are all the same card now, because they all just search each other. This ends on the exact same board as the Wanted, and this is exactly how you do it. It just starts off a little bit differently. So we still need the Deception plus the monster and the discard, because we're still going to go through Diabellstar. We just start with the Deception to tribute the monster to get the Howard Azamina, and then we go for the Azamina, summon out the Arcielago, and then this searches for Wanted. This is pretty critical to search for Wanted. If you go for OSS here, then you're going to find that you're in trouble because you don't have a monster to shuffle back from the graveyard for OSS's graveyard effect. So what you would have to do is activate the OSS, send away the Arcielago, and then go for full combo anyway with Snake Eye Ash, which is fine, but you're missing out on your Omni Negate. So it is better to go for the Wanted. This is why you need that extra discard, so that you can get Diabellstar, discard it, and then activate the Diabellstar effect. And now we get to set the OSS, link away so that we make use of the body. Now shuffle back the Arcielago, and we get the Howlet Azamina. Now here we get to send away from the graveyard, send away from the field. This card does say that if it's face down, you can still send it. It just reveals it first. And then we get to summon the Sylvia, I should say. So this is exactly the same. Now we activate, we have the Diabellstar in the graveyard, and from here the line is identical, we're just not going to get a draw. Actually we are going to get a draw, sorry, because we did search for the wanted. So we're going to go the regular line, into Oak, summon out the Closed Moon, place the Diabellstar, into Requiem, into Engraver, equip, and then we get to send away the equip for free for Flamberge. Now we're going to draw. This draw was wrong. I should have drew like I did in the previous example where we wait for this Engraver to get shuffled back into the deck. That would have been the better time to draw, because drawing Engraver would have been very strong. So here we're just going to go for the same line, into Heater just to turn off the Firelock. Now we can go for Sequence. We make our Desiree, or our Caesar, summon Appaloosa, and then don't forget the Flamberge this time. Yeah, set the Deception in the end phase, exactly the same end board. This draw is just from Wanted, this is a random draw, so this could be a hand trap. Yeah, so it's exactly the same. The next card to go over is Engraver one-card combo. So Engraver has a few different options, but the interesting one is this line. This is a 2-material Appaloosa, a Flamberge and an IP in the back row, and a Princess. So this is 5 disruptions. It's a weaker end board than the other starters, but it is still okay. So let's have a look at how this combo goes. This is why you need the Beatrice, because you're going to use Engraver, just a Fiendsmith engine, to access your Snake Eye cards. So you're going to start with Engraver, go for Tract, add Lurry, then discard Lurry. Mandatory effect will trigger to summon itself. You link it to Requiem. Requiem then summons Engraver. Now, because we have the second Engraver name in the graveyard, we can activate it, shuffle back the Requiem, and summon the Engraver. So this is how the one-card Engraver combo works. It relies on that second name, the one that you discard and start with, and then the second one to summon from the deck with Requiem. Relies on having both names so that you can do this. Make the sequence, and then go for Lacrima. You have to go Lacrima instead of Desiree. You could go Desiree, you do have the names for it, but that would just be Desiree Pass, and there's something a lot stronger that you can do here, which is obviously Beatrice. So you can make Caesar here, you can make Desiree, like I said, but the strongest option when you don't have any other engines is to go for Beatrice. Beatrice sends the Snake Eye Ash. This is the best starter to send. It's obviously your main starter. Anything else wouldn't be as good. And then you can go Princess to revive it. Don't forget to use the Lacrima just to recycle. Getting the Lacrima burn is less about the burn damage, unless you're playing in time. It's more about the recycling. If the game does go long, then having all of the Fiendsmith cards constantly back in rotation turns out it's quite good. So don't forget to activate these, and make sure you leave the Engraver itself in the graveyard, because this one does have its graveyard effect next turn, so you're going to leave it available as follow-up. And then from here you just revive the Ash, you go for Poplar. Now this line is not straightforward because you've obviously already used your Princess. So this is not going to be the same one-card Ash combo that we're familiar with. We are going to send away the Diabellstar. It looks very similar, but here we're going to revive the Oak revive with Oak, and now we're going to send away the Temple to summon a Flamberge. Now we're going to link into Heater, replace the Diabellstar, replace the Oak, and then link away into IP. So this is how we're going to get to Appaloosa, and we're going to use the Flamberge to float to target the IP. Notice we never floated the Flamberge. This is important. Don't tunnel vision on floating the Flamberge if you don't have to. There are plenty of lines, especially where you go for Princess before Flamberge, where you will not float it. So if you're going for Beatrice, which goes for Princess Revive before getting to Flamberge. Don't obsess over trying to link this away to get the value, because it might actually not be worth it. Here you can notice that we have everything. We have the Princess in the graveyard, we have the Appaloosa, we have the IP, and the Flamberge is on the board, but we never linked it away. If at any point we were to try and link it away, it actually just wouldn't be worth it. Because there's no way to get it back, right? If you've already used Princess, then you can't link it away because you can't get it back. So it's better to just leave it on the board here. And this is the end board. We have a 2-material Appaloosa, IP into SB, plus Princess. Something else about the Engraver 1-card combo to remember is that we can also just end on Desiree, like I pointed out. You can also just end on Caesar, and you can also just end on Appaloosa, right? If you think about it, you go sequence, summon the 2 level 6s. You can overlay for Beatrice, or you can overlay for Caesar, but you could also link them all off just for Appaloosa. That is 4 link material. And all of those options could actually be real if your Engraver is not your only play. So if you have Engraver plus another play, and you just want to be safe into hand traps, you can go for an Appaloosa with just the Engraver, and then go for your normal summon Snake Eye Ash. That would be an interesting way to play around hand traps. Anyway, so next we have Tract plus a normal summon. So as I said before, Tract is not a good draw. Neither is Lurry, which is why the Engraver is the only real 1-card combo in the Fiendsmith engine. But if you do have a normal summon, Tract can actually make a board. You can see here we actually have, technically it's even stronger than the Engraver 1-card combo, which is interesting to think about. This is actually 6 disruptions, 1 more than the Engraver 1-card combo, and this is how we do it. It does require a normal summon though. So we start with Tract, and a random monster that we can normal summon. So we're going to go Tract into Lurry, discard the Lurry, mandatory effect will summon itself. Now we're going to go Requiem into Engraver. Now we have that normal summon, we go into sequence. Right? If you think about it, without that normal summon, we just passed on the Engraver. We didn't have a way to summon an extra body, but we do now that we have a normal summon. So we're going to make sequence into Lacrima, and then Lacrima can revive the Engraver. Here, same as before, can make Caesar, can make Appaloosa, but of course the strongest one in theory is Beatrice. Discard Engraver first, or detach Engraver first. I didn't point this out in the last one, I think. But if you detach Lacrima first, then when it hits the graveyard, you're not going to have another Fiend monster to do the effect. So make sure you detach the Engraver first. Then send the Ash, and now we go for the same line as before. The only difference here is that we've used our normal summon, but we haven't used our Engraver effect in the graveyard. So that's how we're going to get this extra body onto the board. We're going to go for the exact same line where we send away the Diabellstar for Oak, then we send away the Temple for Flamberge, leaving the Flamberge on the board, not floating it, just going for the Masquerena into the Appaloosa like before. In the previous line we used these 2 materials to make Appaloosa, but because we have, in this line, we have the Engraver graveyard effect available, we're going to go ahead and use that. Notice that we actually didn't use our Engraver. We didn't use our Lacrima because we needed it in the graveyard to shuffle back for Engraver. In the previous combo, it matters that you detach Engraver first because you're going to use the Lacrima, but in this scenario it actually doesn't matter because you're going to use Engraver. Now you have 3 bodies for Appaloosa, and it's the exact same board. You use the Flamberge, place the IP, and that's the combo. If you think about it and how this is actually stronger, technically by 1 negate, than the previous combo with Engraver, the only reason it's allowed to be 1 material higher on the Appaloosa is because we normal summoned. This line doesn't actually use our normal summon, so if we have a wasted normal summon, let's say we have a Fuwalas in our hand that we can't use, or a duplicate hand trap, we can normal summon it before making the Appaloosa, and then this line can have a 3 material Appaloosa instead. Right? So it's exactly the same. The only downside, or the only difference then, would be that the Tract, instead of the Engraver, needs to have the normal summon, otherwise it does nothing, whereas Engraver can still do this board without the normal summon. So in general, Engraver is still your better draw, and Tract is still your worst draw, but you can still make a combo with Tract plus any normal summon. Next is OSS plus a normal summon. You can see that this ends on Desiree, the Material Appaloosa, Flamberge, IP in the back row, Princess in the graveyard. And if that sounds familiar, that's because it's your Ash 1-card combo, right? Same as your Bonfire 1-card combo. At least this first option is not this second option that requires Linkaribo. It's this first option. So yeah, it's exactly the same. The reason this is allowed to work is because we don't search OSS in our Poplar line, right? So if we normal summon Ash, we use OSS, then we can special summon Snake Eye Ash, and then we can go for the regular line. Here, it's as if we had normal summoned the Snake Eye Ash anyway. The only difference is that right here, would be our 5th summon in this line, whereas in the previous line where we normal summoned it was only our 4th summon. So we're not actually playing as well into Nibiru here, because we normal summon the Ash, then we summon the Snash, then the Poplar, then the Oak, then the Ash again. So that's 5 summons. So what happens is our opponent could Nibiru was right here, and the way we would extend from there is actually not that good. It's not that good. What we would have to do is activate the Poplar that would trigger, replace the Diabellstar. The Diabellstar would then summon itself and place one of these back in the back row, probably the Oak. And then with the token that we got from Nibiru plus the Diabellstar, we would just make IP, and we would pass, basically. Pass on IP and an empty board. When our opponent summons, the Temple gets to summon the Oak that's in our back row. Oak gets to revive something else, and we can use IP to go into Appaloosa, or SP if that's better. It's not great, but it is something into Nibiru. So this is the one downside compared to the regular normal summon Snake Eye Ash line. However, let's assume that there is no Nibiru. From here it's going to be the exact same line. We're going to go into the closed world, place the Diabellstar, Fiendsmith line. You've seen this before. Place a random card, make the Doomed Dragon go into sequence. Shuffle back for Desiree. Make sure we have 3 zones available for the Princess line. We're going to place the sequence, negate the Princess. Now we can make the IP into the Appaloosa, and we end on this same end board. It is vulnerable to Nibiru again. This could be Caesar, and that will protect from Nibiru later on, but early on it was still vulnerable to Nibiru. Okay, so next now move on to some 2-card combos. We have Ash plus Engraver. You can see this end board is very strong. It's 8 disruptions in total, so that's very, very strong. And we have a 2-card combo now, Ash plus Engraver, which means we are a lot more able to play through hand traps. You can see it says here, if the Ash line is stopped early, then Engraver extends pretty well. So this is how the combo works. We're going to have Ash plus Engraver and no other discards. We're going to start with the normal summon Ash. The reason why you want to start Ash instead of Engraver is because, let's say you start with Engraver and you get hit with Droll and Lockbird, the Ash does nothing, the Tract does nothing, and the Ash does nothing. So you basically got your 2-card combo completely countered by Droll. So the way to play into Droll would be to start with the Ash. That way you can search Poplar, and when you trigger the Poplar here, your opponent would chain Droll and Lockbird, and then you would still have a vanilla Snake Eye line with these 2 bodies that would still go quite far. So here you're going to trigger the Poplar, you're going to get the Temple, and what you're going to do here is activate Temple, place Diabellstar, very familiar. You can see that this is how we like to play most of the lines. We're going to send away the Temple for Flamberge into the Closed Moon. So this is interesting, going into Closed Moon into Requiem to access Fiendsmith cards, even though we already have Engraver. There is a very particular reason why this is good. As unintuitive as it sounds, it's actually good when you have Engraver in hand. It's actually good to access the Fiendsmith anyway through Moon, because it helps you get extra light fiends and names into the graveyard. Most of the time, you need the Moon as an additional Light Fiend name in the graveyard in order to do your fusion plays. So you're going to go for this line anyway. This looks exactly the same as the 1-card combo, as if you didn't even have Engraver in the hand. So you're going to place the Ash, you're going to place the Requiem. That's going to give you the Doomed Dragon. Now we're going to go into Sequence. Sequence is going to let us shuffle back. Now this is actually very important that we make Desiree. In this line specifically, this has to be Desiree. This is one example where this is not Caesar. This is definitely Desiree, for reasons that we'll see later. So next, while we have the space, we're going to go for the Princess line, float the Flamberge, revive 2, and then Princess revives the Flamberge. Now we turn off the Firelock by going for Charmer. The reason why we don't want to equip the Sequence and then negate the Princess is because we don't want to make a 2-material Appaloosa anyway. We want to go ahead and make more than that. So we're going to make the Masquerena first, then we're going to activate the Engraver. Now we can go for Tract, but Lurie. Lurie, mandatory effect, activates. Now what we can do is activate, we can link into Appaloosa so that we have room on the board. We have a 2-material Appaloosa anyway. I thought it was going to be a 3-material, but that's not how the line works. We're just going to go 2-material, activate the Flamberge to place the Princess, now that we have a negate for multiple Bestials. And now what you're going to do is use the Tract. This is why you haven't equipped the Sequence yet, because this line actually fuses away the Desiree for Lacrima. Underused effect of Lacrima, target any Light Fiend. Does not have to target Engraver, this can target any Light Fiend, and that includes Desiree. This card can be summoned. No restrictions on that, so we're just going to summon back Desiree. Now we can equip this Desiree with the Sequence, and now we get to use Engraver to shuffle back that extra Lurie. And look, we have 2 level 6s on the board. That's going to be Caesar, and that's going to be the end board. We have an Appaloosa, the Snake Eye, Flamberge Dragon with the Masquerena, the Princess, the Desiree, and then also an extra Caesar. So that extra Engraver basically gave us an extra Caesar. Okay, so moving on, next we have Wanted plus Engraver plus 1 monster plus 1 discard. So this is technically a 4-card combo, but it's a 2 specific card combo. We only need Wanted and Engraver, and then out of the remaining 3 cards in our hand, only one of them needs to be a monster for this to be fulfilled, right? 1 discard can be anything, and then we only need 1 monster. And this end board is Desiree, 3-material Appaloosa, Sylvia, Caesar, Flamberge and IP, and the Temple, with the Oak in the back row, the Princess, and even a draw 1. So this is the God board, as I've called it. It's 10 disruptions. So this is really, really strong. Considering that you could have a hand trap on top of this, your draw 1 could easily be a hand trap too. This is a game-winning board. You don't lose when you make this. So this is how it works. You might understand exactly how it works based on the previous combo. You can probably figure it out. But here's how the line works. We have our random discards and our random monsters. And there's our Fiendsmith Engraver. We're going to go Wanted in the draw phase to play around draw. Main phase, activate, discard the non-monster because we want to tribute the monster. We set Deception, activate Deception, tribute the monster, search for the Howled Azamina. So we're going to start with these cards, always starting with the Deception, and the Sinful Spoil stuff makes sense because that's going to get you to a negate, so the rest of your hand can be safe, right? So this Engraver combo is going to resolve because we have the Omni negate. So here we're going to link off. The reason why we always make IP here instead of Closed Moon is because the way it works out when we do the full combo is that we really, really, really wanted the IP in the graveyard already so that we don't have to find a way to make it later. But it does technically play better into hand traps to make Closed Moon here, because let's say that we activate this Howled Azamina and our Murcielago gets hit with a Bestial. So we don't get to add back the Azamina, and then we just have the Closed Moon on the board and the OSS in the hand. Well, if we have the Masquerena instead, we have one line, which is OSS. Whereas if we had Closed Moon, we can go Requiem, we can go Engraver, we can equip the Requiem, then send away the Requiem for the OSS. So there's more options if you make Closed Moon, which is a way of playing around hand traps. But here in the pure build, this is going to, or the pure line, I should say, this is going to result in a stronger end board. So we're going to add back the Azamina, discard the OSS, go for the Omni Negate. Here we have the exact same line. You can see it's the exact same situation as we've had many times. We're going to go for the Snake Eye Ash combo. So Poplar, Spatial Summon into Temple. I'm going to activate Temple, and exactly the same as before, we're going to send away the Diabellstar for Oak, holding the Engraver until after. Unintuitively, like I pointed out before, it is better to use Engraver later rather than earlier on, and then still access your Fiendsmith cards anyway, as if you didn't have the Engraver through the Moon of the Closed Heaven. This is still the optimal way to play it. You're going to summon the second Engraver, equip the Requiem, and now you have a free send for Oak. For Flamberge, now you can summon, you can place the Oak in the back row, summon out Sequence, link off while you have the space. For Princess, float the Flamberge, revive the Flamberge, and now we have to turn off the Firelock by going for Princess. Now we can use the Sequence now that we have room, and here it doesn't matter that we don't have room because we're not making Lacrima, we're making Desiree. And then we're not going to... we're going to draw now. We're not going to equip the Sequence right away because we're going to do the same thing as the previous line where we fuse away this Lacrima. This Desiree into Lacrima. We're going to draw now. I think this is a mistake. I think we should have drew after activating Engraver, just so that we don't draw into Tract here. But it's fine. We draw here, it's roughly the same thing. Now we're going to activate Engraver and search for Tract. So now we would use the draw, just so that we get the Tract out of the deck. And now we're going to link away into our Appaloosa. It's 3 materials. Now we can use the Tract. Discard the Lurry, special the Lurry. And now we have 2 Light Fiends on the board, Tract in the graveyard, so we can use its graveyard effect. Fuse into Lacrima. Lacrima revives the Desiree. We get to equip the Sequence. And now we haven't used Engraver's effect, so we can special summon it, and that makes Caesar. Now that we have infinite protection from Bestials and Nibiru, we can use the Flamberge, place the IP, and then in the end phase we also get to set Deception. So this end board is unstoppable. This is the God board. I would be very interested to know if you make this and ever lose the game. I would wager you probably will never lose the game, but I guess technically it's not impossible. But this is the God board. This is the unbeatable board. If you make this, you should win. And then the next 2 combos is just exactly the same. Obviously, I said that Wanted, Diabellstar, and Deception, they're all interchangeable, they're all the same. In the same way that these combos start slightly differently, but end up in the same place, it's exactly the same for these. You're going to start in whichever way is appropriate, just like in this other lines, in the 1-card lines. And then you're going to hold the Engraver until the end, go for the Tract later on, and do the exact same line to end on the same board. So yeah, that's it for this little spreadsheet for the pre-Lacrima combos. We can briefly look at the post-Lacrima combos as well, which there's a lot more of. So this is what you can do post-Lacrima if we ever have no hits and we have Beatrice legal, and then we get Lacrima, then this whole spreadsheet is appropriate. It's likely that we get hits first, like a Beatrice, or maybe even a Fiendsmith direct hit before getting Lacrima. But if not, then this part of the spreadsheet is also very viable. So then these are the post-Lacrima lines. You can see there's a few different options for how to play Snake Eye Ash. It says here at the bottom that the best 1-card combo to go for blind is probably option 3. The reason for option 3 here is that it plays around Nibiru completely, and it's able to do that without actually using the Doomed Dragon. So by freeing up a space in your extra deck, you're able to not play the Doomed Dragon, and you can go for a line like this and still beat Nibiru completely. So it's going to be the same so far as every other line. We're going into Diabellstar, sending away the temple this time for oak, summoning back, and now summoning Flamberge. So the reason why we're going Flamberge now, sending the temple, is because this is the 5th summon, so we're now Nibiru proof. If we get hit with Nibiru here, we can float the Flamberge. We're going to leave it on the board unfloated, and then go for a Fiendsmith line. This is very familiar. Now here we're going to go for Lacrima. So this is where you'll make use of the new Lacrima. If you just summon Engraver here, then you can't do anything else Fiendsmith wise from the graveyard. You can equip Requiem, and then you would have to go into Doomdragon using your back row. But because we have Lacrima, we can actually get another body without needing the Doomdragon. So we can send the Engraver, which is able to special summon itself. Now we can go into sequence, and we could of course use the Diabellstar as a summon, but this is still an extra body this way, right? Because we have it available later. We need 2 extra bodies here, not just one for the sequence. So we need this Diabellstar as well. Lacrima revives the Engraver. We make Caesar. Now we're completely Nibiru proof, and we've yet to float the Flamberge. So now we can float the Flamberge, save from Nibiru, revive 2, use the princess to revive the Flamberge, and now this is where we need that extra body, right? We couldn't just use the Diabellstar earlier to make the sequence. This line wouldn't work, because you'd be in a position here where you need one more body. You link away the princess to take away the Firelock, and you go into Heater. There's no IP in the graveyard yet, and there's no second body to make the IP with, right? If we didn't have this Diabellstar. So it's very important that we have this Diabellstar available, which is why we needed the extra body from the Engraver effect, and that was only possible because of Lacrima. Otherwise, we would have to go through a Doomed Dragon at some point, which would get us that extra body. That's what we're doing currently, but post-Lacrima we don't need to do that. We can achieve this same end board without the Doomed Dragon. So we're going to place the IP, and that's it for the combo. And this line also doesn't require Linkaribo, so this is a much more practical option that plays around Nibiru completely. It's still relatively strong. It doesn't require Doomed Dragon, and it doesn't require Linkaribo, so it's a lot safer. It's a safe line, and it's a lot more less stressful on your extra deck. There's also lines into Droll and Maxi. We have a couple of lines here which are mentioned for Snake Eye Ash. This is here if we're getting hit with Droll. This is what we can still do under Droll. So with 1 Snake Eye Ash, we go for Poplar. It's going to be Chainlink 1 Poplar, Chainlink 2 Droll, so we don't get to search. But if we do play Linkaribo, we get to play like this. We can summon the Oak, summon back the Ash, and now at this point none of these Snake Eye plays require searching, and none of these Fiendsmith plays require searching either. So we're going to float the Flamberge. You can see this is playing pretty hard into Nibiru here. If we get hit with Nibiru, we are in trouble. But we've already been hit with Droll, so expecting one card to then play through another hand trap is quite a lot to ask for, to be honest. So we're going to go into Requiem. This goes into Engraver. Go into sequence. None of this requires a search. This is still exactly the same. Lacrima, revive Engraver, go into IP. Now we can reborn the Engraver. This is just to make sure we have enough bodies. We go into Princess, into Appaloosa, and we place the IP. So you can still end on Princess in the graveyard, IP Flamberge, and Appaloosa for 2 if you get Drolled on your Snake Eye Ash line. And then there's also a line into Maxi here. This is the same, by the way. These lines are the same into Maxi and Droll for every Ash combo. That's why I've only listed them at the top here. This is what you can do if you get hit with Maxi. So you're going to start with the Ash, into the Poplar, and now it's going to be Chainlink to Maxi. So they're going to draw 1 for the Poplar, and you're just going to search Temple, place Flamberge this time, summon IP, and then Poplar places the Ash in the back row. This is the best thing you can do. You give 2 draws for Maxi, and if it's Foolish, you only give 1 draw, because it doesn't draw for Poplar, right? So depending on when your opponent drops the Foolish, if they do it on the summon of Ash or on the summon of Poplar, then before you use Temple, you can obviously choose what to place. But if they use it after, then you've obviously already sent the Diabellstar in the back row, so it is slightly different. But let's say it's Maxi, you give 2 draws, and this is the best you can do. On your opponent's turn, they will trigger the Temple. You're going to summon Flamberge, and then Flamberge is going to summon Ash, which is going to search for Oak, and now you have Flamberge, IP, Ash all on the board. You can make SP, you can make Appaloosa, and when you do, the Flamberge is going to float. You have 2 monsters in the graveyard. Poplar is going to search on summon as well for OSS. So you're going to get a lot of follow-up, and potentially still a lot of disruption. So that's it for the Ash 1-card combos. There is also a Bonfire 1-card combo, which is exactly the same. This is exactly the same end board as the recommended Ash line, this option 3 here. Because it is the same, it just plays harder into Droll. If you get Drolled on Bonfire, it's a lot worse. You can't do the line that we just saw. It is going to have to be... you're going to have to take the L on that one. Unless you have another way to play, that pretty much cancels your play entirely. But there is this line here, Bonfire plus a Hand Trap. This is a nice way of playing around Impump. So if we look at this line, we can see that if we go Bonfire on its own plus Vela, let's say, if we went Bonfire and we search for Snake Eye Ash, and we normal summon the Ash, we get hit with a Hand Trap like a Vela or a Maxi, not a Maxi, an Impump, or even an Ash Blossom on Ash's first effect. We're pretty much ending turn to that if this is the only combo we have. But if we want to play into that a little more, we can get Poplar, and then special summon the Poplar. So now if we get hit with Impum or Vela on Poplar, what we can do is normal summon the effect Vela, go into our Fiendsmith engine, and then because Lacrima is legal in these combos, that's gonna go quite far. So this is how it would go if we don't get hand trapped. We're gonna go OSS. We have to. We can't go Temple because we need a way to access Ash and Oak. We're gonna go Linkuriboh, place this in the back row, summon Ash. Now Ash can search for Oak here, and because we've not normal summoned, this Oak can be our normal summon. So we're going to go into closed heaven here, and this is the Fiendsmith line. Summon that Lacrima, send Engraver, use Engraver. Oh sorry, use Requiem first. Now we can normal summon the Oak. Now we can place the Requiem for a free send for Flamberge. Now we can summon the Engraver. We have this Flamberge sitting here. It helps us play through Nibiru a bit, but not that much. We're going to go sequence here, and then sequence is going to fuse. So we're going into Lacrima. Lacrima is going to summon. This makes a Caesar. And now we can float our Flamberge into Princess. We have the 3 zones available. Revive with Princess. There's Flamberge. So now we can link off into our heater and then into our IP. I moved the heater there. It does have to make sure that you have a zone available. Don't mess this up. And now you can link off into the Appaloosa and place the IP. So this is still a pretty strong board. We didn't end up using that hand trap as our normal summon, which is... I think this is the most attractive part of this line. It's that this hand trap didn't get normal summoned. Right, we normal summoned the Oak instead. So if we try to use the Bonfire here to play better into Impum, we're not actually spending anything, right? We're not actually giving up this effect Vela. It is just a safer line in general. And if we do get hit with a hand trap, you can see there's a line here that specifies what happens. This is what happens if you get hit with an Impum or a Vela on the Poplar. So here we get hit with a hand trap, then we can go into Moon, and because of what Lacrima does for the Fiendsmith engine now, it is full combo. 2 monsters is full Fiendsmith combo. We're going into Sequence, into Lacrima, into Engraver, and this gets us into Beatrice. We've already accessed Poplar, but we placed it in our back row. We still need to access the rest of the Snake Eye cards. So we're going to go Beatrice, send Ash, and then we're going to revive it with Princess. This line is pretty good, but even better than the regular Beatrice line is because we have Poplar already used in the back row. We have this extra send, we can go Oak, revive, and now we can send from the back row. So we can go into Flamberge, we're going to go IP, revive 2, and then make, we can make a Linkaribo here, but you don't have to. This is completely unnecessary. This is just, hypothetically, we're playing Linkaribo in these combos because we're not playing Doomed Dragon. But you could, if you wanted to, as a tech choice, still play Doomed Dragon over the Linkaribo. And then we're going to pass. The reason why we're not going into anything else is because we've already used Princess. We can't do what you would normally do and end on the Flamberge. But we're ending on the IP, which is the next best thing. We can go IP, link into Appaloosa or SP, and we have one fire monster on the board for Princess to be live. It's not great, but it is better than nothing. It would be a lot worse if we just went for Snake Eye Ash with our Bonfire and then got impumped. At least this line we had something available. And then the Wanted and Diabellstar lines are exactly the same. The Lacrima doesn't really change much. We can see the end board is exactly the same. This is the full board of Desiree, Sylvia, Appaloosa, Flamberge, and IP. Princess in the Graveyard, it's the full combo just like before. It looks exactly the same. We will go through Lacrima in these lines, but the end result is the same. Same for the Diabellstar. Here there's a new Poplar one-card combo. This is what you can do now with Lacrima released. This is the Poplar one-card combo, and this also works better with Linkaribo. Since we're playing Lacrima, we're not playing Doomed Dragon, so we are playing Linkaribo. We can link it off, place the Poplar, summon Oak. No reason to summon Ash, might as well summon Oak. Then we go for the Fiendsmith line, we equip, and then send away for free. Now we can trigger the Engraver, summon out Sequence. This summons out Desiree, then we go into Princess, float the Flamberge, revive the Flamberge, negate the Desiree, negate with Desiree so that we can link off the Princess into Appaloosa. That line deleted itself at the end there, but yeah, you could go back and pause the video if you missed it. And then we have some 1-for-1 lines. This is exactly the same as Ash one-card combo. If you think about it, we're just discarding a monster and then normal summoning Ash from our deck. It's not really any different to that, so that's why there's these three options. They're exactly the same as the Ash normal summon one-card options. The only other thing about 1-for-1 that is more interesting is that you never have to go for this line where you have you never have to worry about the issue that this line has. You know, where you go Bonfire for Poplar instead, so that you can normal summon and then make a Fiendsmith combo. You're not as weak to Imperm with the 1-for-1 lines, because if you do have a normal summon, you can normal summon something, beat Imperm, even if you go for Ash with the 1-for-1. So it is nicer into Imperm, but it of course needs a discard, so that is the downside of the 1-for-1 line. Then we have the Engraver one-card options. So here are basically the same line. The Engraver one-card option is pretty much the same as it was in the previous pre-Lacrima lines. You can see this ends on a 2-material Appaloosa, a Flamberge, an IP with a Princess in the graveyard, and the Engraver one-card combo ends on the same thing. 2-material Appaloosa, Flamberge, IP, Princess in the graveyard. There's not really any difference here. We can also use Engraver to just make a Caesar, or a Desiree, or an Appaloosa, like I pointed out before. And then here's an interesting option, Engraver plus a normal summon, Desiree plus Caesar. There's not really much reason to go for this, considering that Beatrice is a line that you have, and getting to your Snake Eye cards is really good. But suppose that Beatrice is banned, then this is still something that you could do with Engraver. You're going to go into the regular line for Lacrima, then we're going to normal summon to make Sequence. So we're saving our Engraver effect in the graveyard. We're going to make Desiree, Then we're going to fusion from the field, use Lacrima to revive the Desiree, equip the sequence, and now we have Engraver effect to make the rank 6. So if hypothetically Beatrice is banned, this is something that you could do with Engraver because you have no way to access the Snake Eye cards. And then one other really big difference between Post-lacrima and Pre-lacrima is that Tract is a 1-card combo now. You can see in the Pre-lacrima lines that Tract on its own did nothing. We required a normal summon in order to make a board, whereas in this line we have Tract 1-card combo without any normal summon, and we still get to make a board thanks to Lacrima. And this is how the combo goes. So we're starting with exactly the regular Fiendsmith line, going into Lacrima. Now we get to revive Engraver, into Sequence, into Lacrima, into Beatrice. And then from here, it's pretty much what you would expect. We're going for the same line with the Princess. We're going to revive the Ash, get the Poplar. This goes for Temple, just like usual. And we can do the exact same line from before, where we summon Oak, send away into Heater, equip the Diabellstar, use the Oak, keeping the Temple on the field this time, going into Appaloosa, plus Flamberge, plus IP in the back row, plus Princess. And we even still have Oak, Temple, so if we get droplets on the Flamberge, then we can still use Temple to summon Masquerena. In general, that is one advantage of Temple, is that if you have Temple on the board, you play better into droplets. And if you don't have it on the board, then you're obviously playing worse into droplets. And then the other consequence of Lacrima is that the Lacrima itself is a combo. You draw one Lacrima, you get to this end board, which is the exact same end board any Light Fiend makes this line. This is how the Fiendsmith engine is supposed to work. Once you get Lacrima, any Light Fiend is able to do whatever you want, basically. So we're going to send Engraver on normal summon, then we're going to go summon the second Engraver with Requiem, we're going to revive it, we're going to make a sequence, that summons Lacrima, that summons Engraver. Now we have this same position where we send Ash into Princess, and it's exactly the same line as you saw before. We'll go through it one more time, summoning Poplar, searching for Temple, and yeah, the line goes on exactly the same as before. Yep, this is the same end board. And then the same is true for Luri. Luri is currently a brick in the deck, but now post-Lacrima, or when we get Lacrima, I should say, it's going to end on the same board. It's the same line that any Light Fiend is able to do, and therefore any 2 random monsters into Closed Heaven is also able to do. So normal summon Luri, go for this same line. We're going to go Revive, into Sequence, into Lacrima, into Beatrice. And yeah, you get the idea, it's the exact same line from here. And then we have this other combo here, OSS plus a normal summon. This combo here, ending on Appaloosa, Caesar, Flamberge, IP, Temple, Oak, Princess, is the same. Desiree, Appaloosa, Flamberge, IP, Princess. Okay, it's not quite the same, but this is just a choice, right? Ending on Caesar over Desiree. This is a choice, right? The Appaloosa having 1 less negate is a choice between the Temple. I think this is how the lines line up. You basically you're forced to send the Temple in this line. I don't think you have an option. But in this line you can keep the Temple and have 1 less negate on Appaloosa. We can go ahead and look at that real quick. Lacrima does allow you to do a little bit more with your bodies. Like, you have a bit more leeway on how to use things. So I suspect that you could choose to send the Temple in this line, and then end on a stronger Appaloosa, if you wanted to. But this combo is going to look relatively normal. We're going to send Diabellstar for Oak. We were weak to Nibiru there because we'd summoned 5 times. Now we're going to go Lacrima into Engraver. We're going to equip, and now we're going to send away the free Requiem. Yeah, without Lacrima, that wouldn't really be available, right? I guess it would be available, so maybe we could have chose to send Temple here if we wanted to. And then we go Lacrima into Caesar, into Princess, Revive, Summon. Yeah. So this is the same line as usual, except we get to keep Temple, and we have 1 less negate on Appaloosa. Yeah, that's fine. I suppose this is still stronger. Temple makes you a little bit more safe from droplets and Dark Ruler, and also it gives you more follow-up. So I suppose this is a stronger line. And then we have Deception plus a discard plus a monster. That's that same end board that ends on pretty much everything. Then there's some 2-card combos here, Ash plus Wanted. Interesting about Ash plus Wanted is that it doesn't really do anything extra. In theory, Wanted searches for Ash anyway, right? That's how the Diabellstar lines work. So hard drawing Ash only really helps you play through hand traps. And it actually says that here, Diabellstar 2-card combos tend to start with Diabellstar to set up the Omni Negate. Sorry, it says it here, Ash plus Wanted combos don't really end on a stronger board than Wanted 1-card combos, but they do push through hand traps better. So if you do get stopped on your Azamina line, then you can just normal summon Ash afterwards at any point and pretty much win the game. I'm not going to go through these lines because they're relatively similar. Same for Ash plus Engraver, this is the same as what we saw before. Ash plus Tract, this is now a real line, thanks to Lacrima. So this line looks like this. So we're going to use the Tract here to special summon the Lurry. I think the reason we did it right there is just to make sure that we have enough materials. Now we're going to fuse away the Desiree, revive the Desiree. Now we get to make the Caesar, summon and float the Flamberge, IP special 2, into Princess, revive the Flamberge, negate the Princess for a 2 material Appaloosa, then place the IP. So this is a very nice line that ends on everything. This is the same end board as we expected from Ash plus Engraver. See, this is the same. Right? No, this is clearly not the same. Yeah, we're missing Temple. That's what we're missing here. It's Temple and Oak that we're missing. That's what you get for drawing Tract instead of Engraver. You miss out on the Temple. But it's functionally the same disruptions. And then we have Ash plus Deception. This is, again, the same line as we've seen before. Ash plus Bonfire versus Impermanent Veiler. This is an interesting line. We can quickly go through this. So if you do draw Ash and Bonfire, and you go Imperm, you can go Poplar, special summon Poplar, so this Ash has been Impermed. We can get OSS now. We link into Linkuriboh, we send away the Poplar for Oak, revive back the Linkuriboh, send away the Linkuriboh for Flamberge. Now we can go for the Fiendsmith line. Haven't yet floated the Flamberge. Go into sequence. Go for the regular line. We're going Desiree here, but of course this could be Caesar. Now we float the Flamberge. Revive, negate. And then we're going into Appaloosa. So you can see something that comes up a lot more post-lacrima is using Desiree to negate your own princess so that you can then link it away into Appaloosa. That is a line that comes up more often now, just because you don't have as many bodies in the pre-lacrima lines, but now you do, so this line is available more often. It's just the way it works out. Then we have Ash plus OSS, Ash plus 1 for 1 and a monster, And these combos, this is the same end board here, this is the same god board that we've seen before with the Desiree, the 3-man Appaloosa, the Sylvia, the Caesar, and the Flamberge. See, it says here it's the god board. You don't lose when you draw when you make this. You don't lose. Wanted plus Tract. This is actually a rare line where we end up on a 4-material Appaloosa, but they're all relatively similar. So we're not going to go through all of them. And then the last thing here is I have on the third sheet here some non-Azamina lines. This is just a little extra if you're not playing Azamina in the Fiendsmith version, which is, I think it's a suspicious choice because Azamina is really strong. But if you don't want to play it, especially post-lacrima, it could be more of a realistic option. Yeah, if you're not playing it, then basically you're going to use Diabellstar to set OSS, and it's going to be the same thing as your Ash 1-card combo, and Diabellstar basically just let you search for it. So you're not going to get a bonus Sylvia negate, you're just going to have the Ash vanilla combo on its own, and that's going to look like pretty much whatever your Ash combo normally looks like. It is more of a choice, to be honest. There's a lot of different options. And in this case, it's going to be this line, where we keep the Temple, and we summon Engraver, summon Requiem, and then send away the Requiem for Oak. So we're keeping Temple the whole time. Yeah, so we're going to burn 12, and we're going to equip the sequence. Now we're going to special summon, float the Flamberge, and on the same board that we've been seeing pretty often, negating negating Princess again, so we can make Appaloosa. And we're also going to draw a card here with Wanted. This is very late, we should have done it before shuffling back materials for Engraver, I think. But this is fine. This is the typical 1-card Ash line. Yeah, so that's what all of these do. It's the exact same for Diabellstar, really. It's just whatever you want to do with Snake Eye Ash, since you're not playing the Azamina cards. So yeah, that's really it for the spreadsheet. This is the main one that matters the most right now, the pre-lacrima versions. The only thing I would say about the post-lacrima combos is that, keep in mind, I know we didn't go through all of them, but we looked through a lot of them, and they were not all using Beatrice, so any of these that aren't using Beatrice are going to be still legal when we get Lacrima, even if Beatrice is banned. So it is likely that she gets banned on the next Master Duel ban list, but it's not likely that anything else is going to get banned from these combos, so these could still be very relevant by the time we get Lacrima. So yeah, that's it for the spreadsheet. You can find this spreadsheet in my Discord. You can get it for free. Just come to the Discord and there's a resources section. You can find things like this. Not just this one, but other ones like my branded one and other resources that aren't by me. So like there's a lot of good stuff here if you want to come and look. So yeah, let me show you a Master Duel game where we actually play with this deck in a real game. Okay, so here is an actual game that I played in Decade's MCS. You can see that we're going first here. We have Deception, Engraver, and then a bunch of non-engine cards. This is a very nice hand for going first. We have a Cold by the Grave, so we can beat a Maxi or a Fualos. And then we have 2 pushes, which means we can very easily beat a non-engine card like Ash or Imperm, like a low impact hand trap. So we're very, very good. This hand is very, very good. This hand is very, very resilient to hand traps. So we're going to start with Deception. We're going to discard the Nibiru. Tributing the Nibiru because it's less likely to be relevant, whereas we're going to keep Vela. Probably not going to need to Nibiru our full combo board, whereas Vela is more likely to be useful. So we're going to go for the Howled Azamina, and then this line obviously starts with the Azamina cards and then follows up with Engraver if we get hand trapped. Our opponent drops the Fualos, but we are simply the better player. We have the Cold by the Grave, so we win the minigame. And our opponent has no other hand traps. We're playing a mirror match, of course, because what else would you play in this tournament? So now we just send away the Deception. We summon the RCL logo. And let's speed this up because we've seen these lines. We go for wanted so that we can get that extra body on the board. We're going to draw now. Now this is important that we draw now. The reason why we draw now is because I don't want to discard my Veiler for Diabellstar. Even though we haven't yet gotten all the bricks out of the deck, which is how the spreadsheet recommends using the draw. In practice, it's more likely that you have a situation like this. You don't want to discard Veiler. I'd rather find another draw, which is a second Deception, so that's obviously the better discard for Diabellstar. So now we set the OSS, we go into Masquerena. This is exactly what we've seen from the spreadsheet line. We go Hallowed, we send away the set OSS, summon out Sylvia. I put it in defense position because it's not certain if my opponent is playing Tempai. They're probably not because the deck is quite large, but it's possible that they're playing Tempai, in which case we put this in defense position just to beat Lightning Storm. So now we go for the OSS into the Snake Eye Ash, and this is the same line that you've seen from the spreadsheets. We go for our Royal Temple, place the Diabellstar into the Oak, exactly the same. We go into Moon, place the Diabellstar, and here we're pretty certain there's no responses from our opponent. We're damn certain that there's no more hand traps, and even if there was, we have an Omni Negate, so we're free to just do the full combo. We go into Princess, and then we revive. Now here, if you remember, the way to best use Engraver as an extender here is later on in the combo, so that's why we already went through our Fiendsmith stuff before using this Engraver. We're going to go into Sequence here, we're going to use the Sequence, and we're going to make Desiree. Now here I make a mistake. What I do here is I make Appaloosa. There's no reason to make a 2-material Appaloosa here. What I should have done is use the Snake Eye Diabellstar. I forgot that I hadn't used this yet. To summon itself, and we make a 3-material Appaloosa. That would have been stronger, of course. But we missed that. We go for the Engraver now. This is the way you extend. You're using the Engraver to get to Caesar, basically. You're going to use the Tract effect, use from the field, into Lacrima. We revive the Desiree. Now we can use the Engraver effect to get that second level 6. We make Caesar. Notice that we left zones available for IP to summon to, right? There's no good putting Appaloosa here, where all of these are blocking it, because you need a zone to summon SP to. So now we're going to use Flamberge, we place the IP, we equip the Sequence, and we go to the end phase, and we pass turn. So this is the God board. We can't really lose from this position, but our opponent plays it out because it's a tournament, they might as well, there's a lot of money on the line. They attack over Appaloosa, we decide to let them go battle phase, we don't care about a Bestial, we have Caesar. So we negate and destroy the Jurist one, and they just have nothing left. We can negate this, or we don't even need to negate this. We can let all of this resolve. And then here I decide to just eliminate everything. We can only negate the last card, and then Princess plus IP will deal with both of these. So we negate this last card no matter what it was. And we destroy both monsters, or remove both monsters. And that's it, we now have lethal on the board already. We can just attack for game. So yeah, anyway, that's it. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for this short guide to Fiendsmith, Azamina, Snake Eye. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this useful. Remember, if you want the spreadsheet from this video, you can come and get it in the Discord. It's free to access. You don't even need to message anybody. You can just get it for free. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.